Thank you. Good morning, directors and staff and public. Welcome to our August 2024 board meeting. A couple of housekeeping items for anybody online that is a member of the public. We will have public time at 11:45, and generally it's about a 2-minute max, and we ask you to focus on a question of the board. So just some brief guidance there. We'll give you more once we get to public time. And we'll take our morning break at 10:30, afternoon break at 2:30, should we still be in session by that time. And I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'd like to take this paper clip off. Acknowledge and respect the Indigenous people within whose traditional lands we are meeting today. And I'll call for adoption of the agenda. Hewitt, Jackman, any discussion? Seeing none online, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And sorry, one other housekeeping item, directors or staff that need to speak, we definitely do not see your hand on board day because there's a lot of people on there, so please do use chat as per usual. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes from July. Thank you, Popoff, Maine. Any edits or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Stuart, go ahead, give some introductions.
So through the chair, we do have a new grants coordinator. Those in the Crescent Valley are very familiar with Ashley Grant, who is a former CSR at the Crescent District Grant Complex. So she's replacing Lisa, who retired at the end of June. So welcome to Ashley.
Thank you very much. All right, we have a delegation this morning. Mr. Ken Glesnikoff, do you want to come up to us? What to call you, Mr. Ken? Come on up and join us. Always good to see you.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody awake and ready to go. So I'm doing a presentation on Forestry Work BC. And it's something that, we've been working on for quite a while, so it's time to start talking about it. I want to thank you all for taking the time to meet with me today, so I appreciate that. And today we're going to talk about something that's pretty important for the forestry in British Columbia. Did it switch yet?
Can try again?
There we go. Good. Who are we? This is a grassroots campaign that started from a meeting held about 2.5 years ago in Richmond. A bunch of independent guys got together and small companies, and it was launched. The campaign was launched in May of this year. We're a group of forest-based organizations, companies representing more than 1,000 businesses engaged in all aspects of British Columbia's forest sector. We're proud to stand up for the tens of thousands of workers and their families who are connected through and concerned about the future of British Columbia. And we need your help. Forestry counts for us. Forestry is a major contributor to the government revenues. More than $6.5 billion across all levels of government are supported by the forest industry. It supports programs, services, infrastructure that British Columbians deserve and need. Not too long ago, forestry contributed over $14 billion to government revenues. The deficit projected going forward is $7 billion. So a healthy industry could reduce or even eliminate that deficit. We know that forestry matters to the Kootenays, but the fact is that forestry matters in every corner of the province. From hospitals, schools, roads, and communities, forestry has been the foundation of our province. BC elections are usually won through a very small corner of the province. There's 3 million people that live in Vancouver. Over 3 million, 6 million live in British Columbia. And yet the Vancouver area tends to elect the next government. The Lower Mainland MLAs that are elected listen to their constituents who are aren't aware of how the forestry benefits their lives. So their constituents tell the MLAs that forestry is bad, which causes the MLAs to take a negative stand towards forestry. Many people in the Lower Mainland don't even know that we plant trees. And to be honest, that's very embarrassing. We in the industry have done a very poor job in telling our story and all the positive things that we do, all the contributions that the industry makes. And just for the record, the industry planted over 220 million seedlings last year. Healthcare is one of the most pressing issues in British Columbia right now. BC's 2024 budget includes 13 billion for capital investment over 3 years to support the construction of long-term care, acute care, and cancer care facilities. The fact is, when BC forest sector does well, we all do better. Businesses flourish, good jobs are created, young people stay in British Columbia. Families thrive rather than just try to survive. Housing is a human right, and any commitment to sustainable forestry for people begins with a working forest. As our population grows, so does our need for critical infrastructure, from schools and roads to hospitals. Political investment on critical infrastructure begins with government revenue, like the revenues that come from the forest industry. Forestry matters in the climate change discussion. And now more than ever, forestry matters in the wake of climate change and natural disasters like wildfires. By actively managing our forests, we reduce the severity of wildfires, protecting our homes and lives. In 2023, 2.84 million hectares burned in BC. That doesn't mean a lot to most people sitting at this table as far as the number. But if only 25% of that was merchantable timber, that's 213 million cubic meters. That's 4.75 million logging trucks. Just to try to give you an idea what that means. That's 4 years of cut in the province. We did that in 5 months. The craziest part of what I'm giving you right now as a number is that it would run our sawmill and mass timber facility with 350 people for 700 years. That's the magnitude that we're talking about as far as the fires go last year. On the carbon side, British Columbia emits 62 million metric tons of carbon per year as a province. The fires in 2023 emitted 102 million metric tons. The average car uses 4.6 metric tons per year. So that's 22 million cars we would have taken off the road. Heat pumps, electric cars are dwarfed by what we caused with those fires last year as far as carbon emission. Not saying that we shouldn't have EVs or heat pumps, but just to put it into perspective, it's a very significant number. What's the future? Today, the future of forestry is uncertain. Simply put, our industry cannot keep up with the plethora of policy changes over the past number of years. And neither apparently can the government decision makers who are trying to issue cutting permits. The result is harvest levels have fallen to less than 60% of the actual annual allowable cut. At the current rate of harvest, the sector will lose the critical mass to sustain itself, and impact will not just be felt by our local supply chain businesses, but all across British Columbia, by everyone in British Columbia. This concern about future has been expressed by communities, Indigenous leaders across and throughout BC, with letters to government and media articles. And now the Kamloops City Council has recognized the critical need to support the forestry through a forestry-focused resolution that will be discussed at the UBCM in the fall. What do we need? Forestry can be part of the solution. This isn't about trees versus jobs. It's about quality of life in BC and an annual allowable cut that we can count on. BC is larger than most countries in the world, 95,000 hectares. Historically, the forest industry operates on 200,000 hectares a year, or 1% of the forestry land base. Last year it was 0.4%, because we harvested for less than 50%. At this rate, more mills will close if it doesn't get changed, and once mills are closed, they generally stay closed. They will not open. And the big piece I'll throw in here for me right now is, being the chair of the ILMA, what concerns me the most is the small mills are going to get hammered much harder than the rest. There are 1,000 parks and protected areas in British Columbia, just under the size of Greece, or just bigger than Cuba or Portugal. I was in Germany twice this summer on business, and I was very envious of what I continued to hear, because the industry there does have a social license. They look at their forest as a garden, and they say we need to tend our garden to gain all benefits from it. They selectively log, they thin, and they clear cut where necessary. Because of this, they have way fewer forest fires, because they're managing the forest. Stanley Park, when I was in Germany, my wife called me and said, you should see the news article that was on CTV News. So apparently the city of Vancouver, this is secondhand, I didn't see the news clip, but my wife did. The city of Vancouver went into Stanley Park and cut down some dead trees. These are danger trees, these are things that could start on fire. And now they're being sued by 10 people in Vancouver, and they're suing the contractor for cutting down dead trees in Stanley Park. And this is an issue. We in the forest industry have done a very poor job educating the people of this province about all the positive things that we do. We're like whack-a-mole in the arcade. We pop our head up, we make a comment, we get whacked, and we go back into our hole and we shut up. And what we're trying to do here is create a grassroots movement that isn't going to put anybody at risk, but talk about facts. We're smarter than this as a society. There are solutions out there that we can work on that would be much better than just drawing a line around a piece of property, throwing away the key, and hoping that it doesn't burn. And then none of us gain anything, right, in those types of solutions. And it just does not work. Over time, forests work through their cycle. We need to manage our forests like the Europeans do. We need to tend it like a garden. And we need to work, and we need a working forest. The momentum is building. More and more communities are starting to really recognize how important forestry is to their community. Communities across BC are rallying with their voices. The mayors, there's many chiefs. There's especially a big push on the First Nations in the North Thompson. And if you need to, the links are there, but we can share the links if you wanted to have some information. We need you to get involved. So I better press the button. As local elected officials, your voices are powerful. There are a number of ways local governments and citizens can get involved. But first and foremost, we ask you to consider raising your voice in the future of the forestry by sending a letter to the Minister of Forest, Minister of State, and requesting a meeting to discuss the impacts to your community. We have a template that posts to the bumper sticker I handed out, has a QR code. If you scan it, it'll take you to the website. On the website, there's a letter that people across BC have been signing and sending in and delivering the message to Victoria and our MLAs that a strong economy and better service needs a harvest level that we can count on. We want this to be a long-term campaign to help get the industry social license back so we can be proud of the forest industry in BC. This is not a flash in the pan. You can learn more on the website, as I just said. I've handed out all of the bumper stickers, and that's it. And I'd be more than willing to take questions.
Thank you so much, Ken. Quick note, directors, you'll see in correspondence, there's a specific request. That request, as per our procedures bylaw, will be discussed in September. But with Ken here today, you are more than welcome to ask him questions. We have about 4 minutes for questions. Director Newell, you're top on the list. And sorry, one more housekeeping item. Director Weatherhead, can you see us and hear us now? Sorry to diverge, I won't take it out of your time.
Yes, I can. Sorry, I was eating a banana.
Okay, great, sorry. Newell and then Popoff. Go ahead, Director Newell.
Ken, thanks. And the presentation, what struck me, I guess, the most was the difference between what the chief forester has created as the annual allowable cut and that amount that's been cut. And you referenced it. I just wonder if you could elaborate on the impacts, because when you've spoken to us before and it's you don't have enough access to fiber, right? If you were allowed to actually cut to the level of the allowable cut, what impact would that have for your industry and your business?
Well, at this point in time, there are a number of companies that are really struggling. We are very fortunate by starting the Mass Timber facility. We are lucky. A bunch of our ILMA members are not so lucky, and there's 2 that right now are contemplating shutting down. So we're down, the budget that the government put out 32 million cubic meters. The annual allowable cut was set at 60 million. The chief forester adjusts that accordingly by TSA and by different areas. So at this point in time, right now, we don't know what the cut's gonna be. We don't know if we're gonna have 32 million, or if we're gonna have 60 million, or if we're gonna have 45 million. And the reason nobody is investing is because there's this uncertainty. So if you don't know if you're gonna have fiber, then how do you invest? And that's kind of where we're at. I truly believe that we can find a number, and we can find a sustainable number, and we can manage to that number. And that doesn't mean that we just pick one particular area. We need to manage the forest, the entire forest. That has to happen, and then we will benefit from that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Director Popoff.
Yeah, through the chair, Ken, thanks for the presentation, a good presentation. I like the idea of managing our forests like our garden. I can relate to that from coming from a generation of gardeners, etc. But I do have a question. It might be a little bit off topic, but with your mass timber facility, if you get your allowable cut reduced, will that affect the mass timber facility? And second question would be, as I understand you're building an office in the Castlegar area. Are you still going to go ahead with the office in Thrums?
I'll ask the second one, or I'll answer the second one first, because it's easier. We don't know. We're contemplating that now. It took way too long, you guys, right? So we want to be in a friendly jurisdiction, and I have to say, Castlegar, the city, through the work that we did with the city, has been fantastic. So you know, it's a lot easier to build somewhere where you want it to be, whereas the feeling of not wanting to be is a little different. For us, when it comes to the mass timber facility and the mill, our biggest reason for success is the fact that we have connected those two. 95% of mass timber facilities in Europe are connected to a sawmill. So if the sawmill doesn't have the trees to cut the lumber to the specs that we need for the mass timber, then it will definitely put a strain on the mass timber facility. A lot of mass timber facilities across North America buy their lumber in the open market and then deal with it. And that's not easy to do because your moisture contents are wrong, your grades are wrong. And then the other problem that you run into is the market. So if the market, like a few years ago, took off and went to $1,500 and you quoted a job using $600, you have a major problem. So it will, if we can.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this time, but I imagine we'll be seeing you in Vancouver as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're actually going to have a booth at the UBCM, so you guys are all more than welcome to come up and talk to us. There is some, and I have a really tough time with the details of when the rid gets dropped, this campaign has to be careful on what it says and all this other stuff, and that's going to be really hard for me. But anyway, we're going to do our best. We're going to do our best. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Always good to see you. Okay, directors. We'll keep going with our business. Item 3 for information, committees and commissions. You've all received the minutes there. With recommendations like Husband Area K, who would like to move those?
I can move that.
Yeah, go ahead. You can probably do them as a block.
I will move that as a
Oh,
block.
sorry. My bad. Don't listen to me. Do them separately.
Yeah, I'll do them separately. Okay. I move that all vote that the resolution 404-24 being the allocation of Nakusp and Area K Recreation Commission number 4 funds be amended by changing Music in the Park, $2,500 to Arrow Lakes District Arts Council Society, $2,500.
Seconded by McLaren Co. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And your next one.
I'll vote that the board approve the payment of the following grants from the Recreation Commission number 4, Area K and Village of Nakusp, Service S 28228, 2024 budget, Royal Canadian Legion Branch 24, $1,800.
Thank you. Second, thanks, McLaren Co. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. Item 3.2.2, Earl Creek Water Treatment. Who would like to take that one? Tierney?
Okay.
Does the board approve an amendment to the 2024 financial plan for services S-251, water utility, Area B, Arrow Creek, to increase count 60000 capital expenses by $159,000, increase account 45,000, transfer from reserves by $169,320, and increase account 59500, transfer to other service by $10,320 in order to complete all recommended HVAC upgrade options in 2024.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Sure.
Thank you, Jackman. Discussion? Cunningham?
Yes, where does this money come from? What account are you getting it from?
It's reserves.
Yeah, okay. The stat reserve,
Sorry, through the chair?
through the chair of stat reserve.
No.
I believe it's the water system reserve.
Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Nelson and District Rec Commission, we have minutes, reports, and a motion. The report was really well done. Are we ready to move a motion? Staff are online if you have questions.
Yeah, the board provide a letter of support to Nelson Care Society to support the application to BC Housing for the potential affordable accommodation project to be located on RDCK property between Nelson and District Community Complex and 824 Front Street. And further, that the letter indicate it is the RDCK's intent to donate the RDCK lands to be assembled into a single parcel in conjunction with the adjacent city of Nelson owned property, subject to legislative responsibilities and statutory requirements of the local government.
Do we have a second? Thank you, DeBoon. Discussion. Vandenberg, I'm just going to go to any of the participants in that service first to see. Okay, Vandenberg, go ahead.
Through the chair, just to be clear, this will be a donation of land, of RDCK land for this project. And the responsibility at that point will end and terminate. There will be no request for managing of said project and so on type of stuff, because it's not covered off in the report.
I'll go to staff for that response. Trisha's online. Is that who's?
Through the chair, I'll respond, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
So through Kelly, it's Director Vandenberg. It's a great question. At this point in time, this is some preliminary work that needs to be done in order to keep this process moving. But the intent here is if this project moves forward, there's a possibility that what this will result in is a housing and recreation addition. But the piece of the building, so that part of that building that will be managed by Nelson Cares through a typical BC housing relationship. So to the point, it will not encumber us as an owner, but we may have a space in that building that we're using for recreational purposes. Is that the question that you were asking? So it doesn't encumber us as an owner, no.
Yes, thank you.
Further discussion on the motion. David, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just supplemental to what Director Vandenberg asked, a question to Manager Kirkle through the chair. When we enter into these types of agreements, I mean, the regional district constantly or let's just say the regional district is perceived as having deep pockets. So what is, or maybe this is a question to the CAO, in terms of our future liability for anything that may happen on this particular property, is there potential liability and potential for lawsuits just because we are still in an owner of part of this? I guess a question to Stuart, please.
Through the chair, I don't believe so, because by the time the project starts, we won't be the owner of the property anymore.
Okay. Yeah, that's the key. That's what I needed to hear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
Participants only.
This is an all vote. Yeah, it's land, so. Thank you. Anybody opposed? Sorry, I don't recall. I asked that. I did? Okay, thank you. Crescent Valley Services Committee, you got a motion to rescind. You would like to, Director Boone? Go ahead.
Yeah. That the resolution 375/24 being that the board directs staff to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the town of Crescent to amend the lease for the use of the Crescent Education Center, and that the board chair and corporate officer be authorized to sign, be rescinded.
Thank you. Second, Jackman, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Water Services Committee, Director Newell, do you want to take that one?
I'd like to move the recommendation that the board adopt the water and wastewater system acquisition policy name and rescind the water and wastewater system name effective immediately.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Graham, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Just a moment, that was like a 10, 12-year process. Good job. Indicative of how challenging and expensive and detailed water system provisioning in rural areas is. Community Sustainability Living Advisory Committee minutes. Director Main, just before I go to you, I just wanted to check with CA. Our first motion, I believe we moved as two separate motions in the committee. They should be two separate motions, should they not? Oh, Ange.
So through the chair, I had a discussion with the meeting coordinator yesterday, because if it was called for division, there had to be a motion.
We moved them separately. We didn't, it was a completely different motion on the agenda for CSLAC, and we moved individual motions.
Okay, so that's my apologies on that. Just from the conversation I had with the meeting coordinator, I took it a different way, so we may have to.
So I
Rest the minutes.
I think for this one, we can just move the first component, and the end there will be a separate motion. Thank you, Director Main, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so the first component is that the board directs staff to draft a community sustainability living advisory committee bylaw to replace the terms of reference.
We have a second.
I'll second, just for discussion.
Yes, go ahead.
Just a minor thing, isn't it? The community sustainable living, not sustainability living?
Yes.
Minor edit. Yeah, Ange got it. Thank you.
Sorry, say again, sorry, I was just making a note of it.
Just amend, sorry, through the chair, amend the word sustainability to sustainable.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? A pretty robust one at CSLAC. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now the second component.
The second component, that the board directs staff to prepare a community sustainable living advisory committee project fund policy.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, Popoff. Discussion? Anyone in the room? Vandenberg.
Just wondering if this needs to be identified as being parallel to that work, which is creating the community bylaw. Because the bylaw almost needs to be done first before the policy can be put in play. And so is there a need to address that understanding?
Through the chair, I don't think in the motion, I think staff's got that direction.
Thank you. Sorry, I just had an email pop up. David, off you are on chat, but was that from a previous item? Previous. Okay, thank you. I can check the time when I look closer. Okay, thanks. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. The third motion now, go ahead, Director.
And this third one is an all vote weighted, that the board directs staff to submit an application to the 2024 Age-Friendly Communities Grant for the Regional Mobility Working Group in the amount of $25,000. And further, if successful, grant funds be allocated to A108 Development Services and the previously allocated $15,000 local government climate action program funding Resolution 384-24 be returned to S100 Reserve, and further that staff be authorized to enter into a contribution agreement with BC Healthy Communities should the RDCK be awarded funding.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Anybody? Thank you. Call vote, discussion? If you don't mind, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3.2.7 Joint Resource Recovery Committee Director Jackman, you shared that yesterday. Go ahead.
Yep, thank you. So for recommendations of the meeting, the first one is all vote. I move the board send the letter as drafted to the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change Strategy regarding the extended producer responsibility programs in RDCK.
Second, Newell, discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, maybe I should ask this yesterday, but I read the letter, of course, and I was involved in the discussion, and it's an excellent letter. The only thing I'm curious about is the CC list, because I didn't see who would be copied on this, and I'm sure that our MLA would and should be copied, but I'm wondering who else should be on the CC list to spread this information around.
We've had an ongoing work with this, so I think we probably have a standard CC list now.
Yes, through the chair, we would, but we'll confirm that definitely the MLAs are on there too. Yeah.
And we would note that it'll go out before UBCM, but of course after UBCM, we would not be CC. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the next motion, go ahead.
Thanks. This is all vote weighted. It's rescinding the resolution. So I move that the resolution number 351-24 being as worded in the minutes be rescinded.
Second, Newell, thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And as worded in the agenda. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Third recommendation, also all vote weighted. I move the board approve the RDCK enter into a consulting services agreement with, gotta figure this out, Autotech Engineering Corporation for Roman Narrows Transfer Station Expansion Project. Chair and corporate officer be authorized to sign necessary documents, the value of $60,609 plus GST, and further costs paid from service A117 recycling central region.
Thank you. Seconded, Newell. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the last motion.
And the last one is again, all vote weighted. I move the board approve the indemnification provisions included with the service agreement number 2023-253 EMB with Waste Management Canada Corporate for provision of collection, transportation, marketing of industrial, commercial, and institutional old corrugated cardboard to the effect of indemnifying Waste Management in Canada against losses that may result from the actions of the RDCK.
Second, thank you, Newell. Discussion? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. That's,
Chair,
yes, Newell.
I didn't want to disrupt the vote on the second item, but the payment from service A117 for that work, wouldn't this come from central waste in general as opposed to a subsection, the resource part of it?
You're talking about the motion that was rescinded?
No, the resolution number 3.
Oh, 3. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, the Roman Narrows transfer station expansion project. I just had a flash, but I thought I'd just double check.
No, through the chair, all the recycling cost for the services now come out of those A services so that the board can see the cost of recycling. Then there's a transfer from the central subregion resource recovery service to cover the expenses in there. So you can actually see how much is going towards recycling in a given year.
Even though the expansion is, sorry, through the chair,
Go ahead.
isn't solely recycling, right? It's also garbage. Part of the Roman Narrow is just a recycling station.
Through the chair, that might be a question for Uli, but I believe that the scope is entirely recycling.
Okay, yeah, because they do, yeah, fair enough. I didn't want to nitpick, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Kind of curious, that's all. It's fine. It'll all work out.
David, if I see you in the chat, was that on a previous motion?
It's a follow-up to what Director Newell has said, and I just have a suggestion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I had the same question and I asked this at a previous meeting and it was explained to me that the way that it was explained to the board that the way this works is that there is this charge to the appropriate resource recovery service. Perhaps that could be reflected in future motions that, you know, that basically it's coming out of this A117 service, but there will be an allocation to, for example, in this case, Central, once the final numbers are known or something to that effect, because this is confusing. A117 is all of us. And what happens is that, and we're contracting and paying through A117. However, there's nothing in the motion that says that there will be a final allocation of costs to to Central, for example, in this case, and what that will be. And I'm just, these A services are really confusing to those of us that have been around a while, and I'm sure it's confusing to any of our constituents that are trying to follow the bouncing ball here. Thanks.
Okay, well, not going down the rabbit hole of consolidated services, it was the board's request that we start identifying these in separate service lines so that we can understand the true cost of individual services or individual aspects of a service. So we're not going to talk about consolidated services right now. That's not on the agenda. I'm sorry, we're done the motions for joint. What are you wanting to ask Director Papa?
No, it's just a suggestion that Director David have had. When you read the motion, it says Central Subregion.
Yes, it does say that. Yeah, okay. Okay, if we want to talk about consolidated services, we can put that on the next joint resource recovery agenda to identify how we do this, but we did ask for these consolidated services so we can identify those numbers. So now we're doing that. And it is good to be able to follow those numbers for the public, but even ourselves can lose track of those, so it's not easy. Further discussion. 3.3.1 external committee. Thank you. Director Jackman, are you in agreement to no longer be on the committee that hasn't been active for a decade?
Call too. I thought we were gonna set a record for during the meetings. I'm good. I'll second this if that's permissible.
Yeah, that's fine. Discussion. I'll just add that Andy Shadrack was on that committee. That's how old it is. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, 3.3.2.
I'd like to recommend Director Jackman.
Let's just ask him to explain it first, and then we'll go to you. I appreciate your quickness today, Director Cohen. Director Jackman, can you please explain IJC and what this motion is in a very concise way? Thanks.
Sure, try and do a little better than my concoction of whereas clauses, which is the only way I had to construct this. I will note that since the late 90s, I became quite interested in the activities of IJC, International Joint Commission. They have an order under their board, an order on Kootenay Lake, which has been in effect for decades and decades. And largely all we hear about once a year is that little window. But these boards of control can look at many, many more things. And they have been now looking, they have expanded their board, they've expanded their scope, and they're looking to address more issues that have impact on that transporter water, of course, which comes from here, goes to the States, comes back to here, and it goes back to the States again. The reason this caught my attention, as I say, I've been tracking them since the barbecue discussions in the late 90s, is in my report to board, you see a very brief reference to IJC, not one of my responsibilities, just area of interest. But I sat in on a webinar when they said they're not now just going to talk about selenium pollution coming out of the Elk River system through the Kootenay into the States, which is a big issue and has been well publicized. They're now going to continue looking at the pollution issues all the way through the system to the confluence with the Columbia Council, including the entirety of Kootenay Lake. I know, and probably others know, of where the province has published reports of really substantial contamination sources in Kootenay Lake due to historical mining activity. It's difficult to say where this is going to go, but it's a big scope. We know Yakanuki is interested in selenium now at the border as it comes from the States into the system, the Canadian side. So in the seminar I was in, the webinar, they explained that they have a very strict timeline and scope of what this new board is going to do, this study board is going to do. And they draw on resources. And in the resources, they have 3 levels of advisory. They have a governance advisory, public advisory, where they get random or focused input, and industry. And in the meeting, there was a question posed, couldn't see from you who, but I know these Kootenay having conversations following up, that they would invite or entertain local government representatives across this system. So I know that East Kootenay, as it says here, put forward a motion that they go to the IJC and ask that they have a director included. And the advice out of those conversations they had was there should maybe be someone who's still more in touch with this side of the business.
Thank you, Director Jackman. So while normally you would wait for an organization to make that request, the IJC is an evolving governance structure. I was going to say beast.
Short
It's quite
timeline,
different.
September 6th.
Yes. So Director Jackman has gone ahead and put this together as they did in the East Kootenays. Newell, I will now go to your.
Yeah, I'd like to, because of Director Jackman's background history and what have you, I'd like to put his name forward to nominate him.
So you're moving the motion with the name Director Jackman in there?
Correct.
Seconded by Paige. Do you accept Director Jackman?
Yeah, I'm gonna be interested in this no matter what.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion, McFadden?
I think through the chair, just wondering, is there a cost attached to, not that it changes my opinion, but just wondering if there's a cost attached to being a part of it?
If I chair, I'm not looking for anything.
Yeah.
I've already been attached to the IJC in other ways by invitation, not looking for anything.
Thank you. So when it's these external ones, sometimes it's them indicating, sometimes it's us, and sometimes it's just director saying, I'm good, I don't need to add that, so. Good. All right, further discussion. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Keep us posted. I'll note that we actually advocated for a few years that IJC open it up to local government representatives, so it has been a long time coming. Thank you for keeping your eye on that. 3.4, verbal reports. We generally move to the end of the meeting, but Director Lockwood?
Can I refer them to the next month?
So we'll see if you get a second on that.
Sure.
Newell, thank you. So on the proprietary of referral. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Email from UBCM and First Nations Leadership Council. We have a motion there. Anyone like to move that motion or ask a question, which should be answered by the document? Vandenberg.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So I did a little bit of research here, and I guess my question is around, and I have to open this up. They refer to a term who are part of the BC treaty process. And so when I researched that brought a little bit of confusion to me because it listed a number of members, but not everyone. So what do I understand First Nations in BC who are part of the BC treaty process? What does that mean? At first I thought it was all First Nations, but it's not. It's specific.
So the letter outlines several different aspects. It's going to include treaty ones. It's also going to include those that are not in treaty processes. So the relationship protocol would apply to all through various entities that are named in the letter. Those in the treaty process are ones that have either initiated or completed that process. Not all of them are doing it. But the relationship protocol would apply to all First Nations under the other banners named in the letter.
Okay. Follow-up question, if I may. With this committee of 5, who this is the council that's formed to look into this from UBC, will come up with the worked around the relationship protocol. At what point will we have input, or should we, or will we have input into what that protocol draft may look like?
Be a question for UBCM.
Mr. Chair, that would be a good question. My expectation is they would put it out for feedback to their members. The fact that they're asking for permission from the membership to even start the conversation makes me think there would be quite a robust engagement process after that. But we can definitely follow up with that question if you're interested in the answer.
Actually, just Director Page, you're on UBCM. Do you have any response to either of these questions?
I think the CEO captured it correctly, like, because we're going through a process of developing these protocols, at this stage, it really was but soliciting really explicit, informed consent from all the membership and local governments before going through each and every one of these steps. So yeah, it's about being very careful, very explicit, and making sure consent is informed and obtained ahead of time before we move through each of the steps.
Sorry, back to you, Vandenberg.
Right, and I appreciate that. It is an assumption at this point, so that letter of support ought to cover that off as making sure that we do have legitimate responses through the steps as they work through this, because it's not driven by a resolution. There is no resolution put forward in UBCM to do this work, so I just want to make sure that we have checks and balances in play that allow us to participate through the process.
Okay, would anyone like to move the motion? Paige? Second, Maine. Further discussion, DeBoon?
No, I'm just gonna second it.
Okay. Paige, go ahead.
I think it's appropriate to put expectations from our perspective on what we might want to see, not whether or not that gets picked up or not. I would also just note that there is a confluence of resolutions over a number of years that indicate support for doing this work. They may not be explicit to the naming of this work, but the intent and for us, what the membership has asked for is why we're getting explicit with yes now. But I think we can certainly ask that whatever our concerns are in the letter, and they'll be considered.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. 5.1 to 5.4 are for information. Again, 5.4 will be on the board agenda in September for discussion because they were a delegation today. Does anyone want to pull 5.1 to 5.3 at this time? Dannenberg, which one?
5.3, just a clarity question.
Okay, 1 second. Anyone else want to pull any communications? Okay, 5.3 for clarity.
Right, so it's a formation of what are they calling it? Walrus is forming an SEI secretariat for the southeast. Does anybody know what that means?
Yeah.
It's an oversight group. It's an oversight group specifically evolving around the issues with the Elk River contamination. So you can Google it. It's not our information. They're just giving us a heads up on it. Go ahead.
So through the chair, the province has done things like this around cannabis in the past. They've done it around, I don't think what other initiatives they have, but really it's almost like I wouldn't want to call it a task force, but it's a group that's got a specialized focus around this issue, and it allows them to generate more engagement processes and feedback. The way that the cannabis one rolled out with the cannabis secretariat was they actually put together working groups that involved UBCM, involved local government, so they could provide direct feedback with how anything that was put through either Health Canada or through the province could get that feedback from local government. So that's how that one worked for cannabis as an example. And I would imagine that using that term, they're probably looking to do something similar with respect to this specific topic.
Thank you.
Okay. Accounts payable, any questions? Grant?
Thank you. Through the chair, two things popped out to me on the AP. One was Fusion West Manufacturing for 108,000, and the other one was IT Blueprint Solutions Consulting for 241,000.
Through the chair, IT Blueprint. Sorry, I do not have that open right now.
Yeah, this, do you want me to ask Jeff?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to set.
I know he's there. Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Did you hear the question?
Yes, regarding IT Blueprint. What was the dollar amount?
241,000.
Are we on the same line?
It's on the top 80%.
Okay, I would have to look into that and get back to you on that one.
Sorry, Paige, you have an answer?
They were the same ones who provided us costing for the network equipment last year.
That's correct, yes. Sorry,
Thank
through the
you.
chair, correct, yes.
Sorry, you had one other question.
Yeah, the other one through the chair was Fusion West Manufacturing for 108,000.
Do you have that one yet?
I do not. I would have to look into that and respond back.
Supplemental, yeah, these reports would be a lot easier if they had lines. Or different colors so that we could review them more easily. I think I've made that suggestion before. Okay, thank you.
If I could also, through the chair, if directors have questions on the AP report when it goes out, feel free to ask them at the meeting. But it's really helpful if you send them in advance too. We can do that work in advance and have the answer ready. So you can still ask it in the open meeting, but we've got the answer right away because we don't know off the top of our head what all these are each and every month.
Yeah, I got David off. Okay. David off, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Question through the chair to the CFO. I'm looking at the accounts payable and where we have our top 80% of payments by value. And I've been asked a question by a constituent and saying, well, when you have accounts payable, usually those are bills. I says, yes. And then the question was, well, we have all these payments to municipalities. For example, City of Castlegar, $372,000. Preston is like almost $1 million. Now you get it. It's like there's like $1 million plus or all, or $1.5 million on out of the 5 million that are payments to municipalities. Now, are those, and the constituent asked me, well, are those something we owe the city as an expense, or is that just flow through for something else? So I just like the CFO to explain that on the record, like, what are these payments? Like, is it to the city?
Okay,
Is
I think he's got the question.
You got the question. Thank you.
Yeah.
I may have a supplemental, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead. I see Uli, but can we go to the CFO, Uli?
Through the chair, I think Uli's got an answer to Director Graham's question on one of the vendors.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Uli. Thank you, Yev, on Director Davidoff's question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So these are the payments to municipalities are for the most part contracted services that we have to the municipalities with the municipalities.
Go ahead, Stuart.
And other grants. I think with the City of Castlegar, that would be for, I believe, for the parks grants. So I don't know if CAO Horn, if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, through the chair, Director Davidoff, the payments to municipalities that we make, I would say that 98% of them relate to either fire service contracts or financial service grants. So if anybody is looking for information around those financial service grants, particularly, our June board meeting is where those are always approved. And there's a list of them that shows what service they come from. So most of them, economic development, parks, we've got the parks contribution to the City of Nelson, which is significant, parks contribution to the City of Castlegar, which is significant, physician recruitment grants, things like that go through our municipal partners. But the easiest way to provide someone that list, if you get a question from a constituent, is the list out of our June board meeting that lists all those financial service grants.
Supplemental, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what I thought, and that's kind of the way I explained it. I says these are, we may collect money for example, the City of Castlegar for their economic development service that gets taxed through the RDCK. And then that's the way I tried to explain it. And then the additional question I received, well, why does that show up as an expense if it's really a taxation and a grant and a flow through? Because that's not really a true expense to the RDCK. And why is it appearing under the accounts payable rather than maybe a subheading saying that these are grant payments or flow through payments, or you get what I'm saying? So bottom line is that, because it really makes our accounts payable look huge, like a $5 million accounts payable is not chicken feed, but really how many of those are true expenses and how many of them are grants or taxation collected for a municipality, et cetera. So I'm just raising that as a perception piece. And maybe there's some better way of reporting it. That's my suggestion. And thank you for the explanations.
Yeah,
So through the chair, if you go to page 18 of the accounts payable report, it lists all of the grants that are paid in that month. So we then summarize by type of payment, and page 18 is all the grants. So if something was made through discretionary community development or other grants, it shows up there. And a lot, and those City of Castlegar, $350,000. Village of Anacostia, $473,000. That's for the arena that we support through a service there. So we do separate things and report them so that the public can see what's a grant and what's an operating expense.
Yeah, it just in the top 80% of payments for July 2024 in our accounts payable, it just looks horrible that we, $4 million, that includes all those things. It's just I guess it's a perception piece, and I did try explain it, and you've confirmed the way I explained it. But the bottom line is that when you look at a $5 million accounts payable figure, the motion that we're going to pass or we're going to consider today, it's just you could see how there could be some confusion. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Through the chair, I completely understand how if you read 2 pages of a 21-page report, you could be misinformed with what's there, but I encourage everybody to read the entire 21 pages.
it is further defined as you're suggesting on page 18. Uli, you had a response to Director Graham's question on one of the items. Go ahead.
Correct. The question was about the $108,000 invoice from Fusion West Manufacturing. This is for the order of roll-off bins for our transfer station hauling. It was approved in April, in the April board meeting as an expense.
Thank you. You got that, Director Graham? Okay, great. Okay, we are on item 7.1, procedures bylaw. So there's a couple different ways we can do this. Staff have summarized the input received, and they collated some of the input to highlight the things that were similar, so they weren't all individual. The proposal from staff was to do similar, that we did on the notice bylaw, which is to send a survey to glean responses on the items that they're seeking further direction on. So that can be the outcome of today, but if we want to entertain some discussion on it, we can do so now. I do have Jackman. We're not going to be moving a motion on this, but we can entertain some discussion. And then again, did you want a motion to direct doing a survey, or can that just be direction to staff?
No, through the chair, that can be direction to staff. We'd like to try to scope it the way that Dan did for the public notice bylaw, where you would just ask specific questions. Yes, no, that's great. A great way for staff to get that feedback into the bylaw, as opposed to, the struggle you'll see in the report here is we had one director mentioning something and staff did not feel comfortable making a change to the procedure bylaw based on the feedback from one director. So that's what this survey will try to accomplish if we can do that. Do you agree with putting something in there that relates to X, yes or no?
So I've got, I know you already got Graham, I believe. You have Jackman, Newell, Popoff. And I will go ahead and explain the one I suggested, just so you know. The provincial administrative one was the one I suggested, and that was to identify the items that come our way that are specifically directed to us to manage through provincial direction. So that would be things like EDMA or something along those lines, so that we can start identifying in our agendas things that are directed for us to do versus those that we might have discretion on doing. So that was just one of the explanations on what the provincial administrative section would be. So I just want to provide that answer. So who was first on the list? Jackman, go ahead.
Sure, thanks. So, and I'm guilty of not articulating my thoughts earlier or very well. I've talked a little bit about the introduction of what we call an advisory now. We wouldn't call it an advisory committee here, so now it's a committee. But an advisory is different. We have advisories now for water. We have advisories for one drainage system. We're talking about them for recreation, parks, trails. So I wanted us to just have in mind whether or not there's a real distinction between an advisory committee and any other commission committee. What it says right now that I think is incorrect, that the advisory is established to provide information and advice to the board. I thought the distinction was going to be an advisory is quite different. It provides information to staff, and then through staff, we will see a roll-up. They're different. They do not have the voice to the board that a committee or commission has. And I've told many volunteers who are trying to, this is where I'm gonna go with it, volunteers. They wanna step up, and I say, if you put your name forward, you have a direct voice to the board. Doesn't matter if I'm in the room during the conversation or not. You guys come up with something, I don't override it, it goes to the board. That has its pluses and minuses. The minuses we've seen, say with the Crescent Valley Ag Advisory, which is a commission, is that they want to remain a little more conversational, a little less rigid, and not be in the public eye the way they have been. So what I'd like us to establish is an advisory, a voice to the board, which this bylaw amendment implies, or is it in fact advice through staff? And do they then have to comply with public attendance, open meetings, and all those other requirements? I think if we sorted that out, we would find we get more volunteers for advisories. And as we move towards this advisory model for recreation and whatever else, that needs to be clear to people when they step up. So that's my quandary right now.
Okay. Do we have Mike to speak to that, or do you want to speak to that? Or Ange, sorry.
Oh, through the chair, that would be something I'd have to discuss with Mike on the definition that would be attached to that, just because at this time there is a provincial advisory committee definition. And so we would just have to take a look at both and see where we can come up, what we can come up with. The direction that you've given, and then looking at the provincial definition.
Supplemental, can he see that provincial definition?
Yeah.
Sort of as a little isolated snippet? Because I'm worried we're gonna use the word advisory without quite understanding what it means.
And sorry, Stuart, what were you saying?
Me? No, nothing.
Okay.
Just the mic was on there, but
And sorry, who from staff, are you taking notes, or is Mike online to take notes?
Mike's there as well. He's taking it.
Okay, great. Oh, there's Mike. That's why the screens don't work very well for me. Okay. Okay, add page to the list, and who is next? Sorry. Graham, go ahead.
Thank you. So when I was reading, thank you for all this work. This is great. Through the chair, just something that came to my mind when I was reading through this is whether this board is ever going to be considering using electronic voting instead of paper voting. And I guess I'm wondering, we're a large board. It seems like it's very time consuming to do all of this paper voting that we do. And I'm wondering what like other large boards are doing, and if that's something that is being considered here in the revision of the bylaws.
Oh, Ange, go ahead.
So through the chair, so that as part of the report is one of the things that we're providing a report to the board at some point in regards to the voting and what are some options, and then getting staff direction. So that is coming in the future, but that's not a part of the procedure bylaw as of now. But if there is a change, of course, we can always amend the bylaw in the future with those changes. But we're just looking for more direction from staff, or from the board, sorry.
And so, but that direction will be seeked once we get the report back on the voting.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And I believe there was a question at that time that you had asked, or someone had asked, that report will look at how other boards do it as well. So it should be covered at that, in that one. Cool. Newell.
Thanks. Just a couple of observations, and thanks for the report, and thanks for people putting their ideas forward. But there were a couple that kind of came to mind that might require more than a survey, because eventually, and so I'll go to part 3 meetings, attendance of directors at meetings, and the fact that someone is suggesting that only a specified number of electronic meetings could be attended per year. In other words, implying that more in-person attendance would be required. A, is that allowed, like through the Local Government Act? B, I don't understand the logic. You know, when you get an idea, it's just an idea, but not really what the person who suggested it is thinking in regard to that. So I'm not quite sure how to kind of suss out that kind of nuance. So that's the first thing, and I don't quite know how to deal with that. And I think I'd say that I don't understand the logic around Part 5 meetings request that all committee and commission minutes be received 3 days prior to the board meeting. You know, which would then mean RAC couldn't happen that week and CSLAC. So while the survey idea I think is great, I think there's some nuance that we need to decide how we want to process someone's thoughts. So those are two examples that I think we needed a discussion and just maybe either shut it down or say, let's explore it more. So for instance, the second one, I say we just shut that down and say, you're at the committee meeting, you're at the committee, so you know what happens, so you don't need 3 days notice necessarily. But anyway, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't think a survey will work.
Well, just to note that it is a good consideration that the 3 days in advance, we have discussed in the past, we've looked at different ways of doing the schedule. When we start moving all of our committees to the week previous, I'll just ask Stuart to explain this because I recalled in the past when we discussed it, it drastically impacted the flow through of business we need to address. So it was not recommended. Stuart, do you?
And through the chair, you're taking up 2 weeks now for RDCK business instead of 1 a month, which was a strain on your schedule. So that was something that we didn't consider mainly because of that draw on your time. To Director Newell's points, I think that you're getting into the how, which is what staff has not looked at. So I think that if we put out the survey and said, is this something you wanted to look at? Then we would look at the how, specifically around, could we, put something in there about attendance in person for a certain number of meetings a year? I don't know if we can do that. We haven't looked at that at all because again, it was a suggestion from one director and staff wasn't going to spend the time doing that research if we didn't have the majority of the board willing to go that route. So we're waiting for that direction before then doing the work to say, is this even something we could put in there, for various reasons.
Supplemental.
Thanks. So what I'm kind of picking up is that take a look at put a survey out. The survey will then fine tune this, to which then we'll have a discussion.
Yeah, part of the purpose of the survey is, it's not as straightforward as the notice bylaw. That one was a little simpler. But part of it is to then narrow down on the things staff are going to be researching and putting time and effort into based on broad support or not enough support. So it just helps staff narrow their work and focus on the areas of interest. And there will be lots more discussion after that. There is no timeline on the procedures bylaw in terms of like a bylaw that needs to be adopted by a budget or anything like that. So we're not in a rush on this one. Can you add David off to the list, please? I'm sorry, who is next? Paige. Papa.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I think most of the points that I'm going to make were already covered.
Thank you. Paige.
Yeah, 2 things. I also concur with my colleague, Director Newell. There are pieces of this. I think at some point we may need to have just another sit down, something beyond just the survey, to have a discussion on the pros and cons of the various sections. The second point is on, again, point 3, we had Don Lidstone in last week at the City of Nelson reviewing our code of conduct and its relationship with the procedural bylaw. One of the discussions that came up was also electronic meeting, the mix between offline and online. And so in that particular 3, I would probably provide the addition of discretion of the chair. That's what the City of Nelson currently has in its procedural bylaw. Is that there's a certain number of meetings that are allowable, and then at that point there's a conversation that is at the discretion of the chair for how many meetings are allowable, and the reasons being about enhanced communication, relationship building, focus and attention that happens when you're online, when you're offline in a room with people versus online, and how that impacts the decision-making architecture. So I would just add language around the discretion of the chair being one of the ways we decide if there's a good mix or not.
Thank you. Director Davidoff, we have you on the list, but can you mute until we get to you? We have a few other speakers ahead. Thank you. Hewitt. Yeah. So Hannah Graff, Davidoff, and then Hewitt. Hannah Graff.
Yeah, to the in-person piece, how do you enforce this? Like, what is the consequence? If someone decides they're gonna attend remotely and what this says, what do you do about it? Like, is there any point in traveling down this path? If there, you can say it all you want and encourage people to attend in person, but we have no way, and probably shouldn't, have any way to force people to do that.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't know the answer to that. As I mentioned, we haven't looked into the how at all on that.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important one to identify. Is this even worth our exploration? And if so, what are the things we need to consider? So I think it's important to note for staff as well, which they probably are already considering, that in the survey, it's not a straight yes or no, it's a yes or no and further context you might want to consider. For me, that really speaks to the code of conduct aspect of it's not an enforcing, like it doesn't have enforcement mechanisms to it. There are ways of doing it, but they're completely other considerations. And so we'll also see that review coming back, which could be then incorporated into anything that we may have in here where we do need enforcement mechanisms or not.
Yeah.
So to get your point.
Yeah. What's the point?
We'll see. So we have David Ock, Hewitt, and then Maine. David Ock, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So again, on the same point, the RDCK, I refer to it as one of the most progressive organizations around when it comes to recognizing meeting attendance virtually or in person. And we had this in place pre-COVID. We had all this in place pre-COVID. People shouldn't be driving on horrible roads, coming to a meeting that may only last 30 minutes. And the bottom line is that hybrid option is a safety issue. It's also a human rights issue, because do I have to provide a medical notice to why I can't be at a meeting? Is that what it's going to boil down to? Because if I have to, I will. And the bottom line is that I think we need to look at human rights. We need number one, safety needs to be job one. I remember driving from my office in Trail to Nelson for a 1-hour meeting, back to Trail to my office, then back to Nelson. It was a huge cost and a safety issue in the winter. So the key thing is it's a lot more than to this, and I'd hate to see a progressive organization going backwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think it's important to note that if, once we get into the question around electronic participation, I don't think the intention is to remove that option. It's to indicate the limits in which someone can attend solely via electronic participation. So it's just putting parameters around it. It's not to eliminate it. I don't think anyone's interested in eliminating it. It is critical. It's critical for the public. So just to clarify, I don't think anyone said that we would eliminate electronic participation, but the question is, are there parameters that need to be considered around that? So that's what we would put to staff, and that would be part of the survey. Director Hewitt.
Okay, thank you, through the chair. On the same thing, but I'll add a different element. With electronic participation, we got people who could be away for 6 months out of the year, out of country, and they're not participating on a community level. I don't have a problem with somebody participating electronically every meeting, because there are different circumstances for different people. But I think the way you control that is, because we encountered this in the village of Castle, that somebody, asked for a 1-month leave for vacation, extended it to 2 to 3 to 4, receiving full stipend, not doing anything, but because they were granted the leave, they continued to draw the salary, which they, to me, were not entitled to. So we dealt with that in our remuneration bylaw, that if the absence is continuous, so they're not really earning their salary, but if they're in the country and actually able to participate. And it's up to each individual director what they feel is appropriate level of participation in their own community and what their constituents would allow. So I understand there are different circumstances for different people, so.
I think it's, again, another important consideration that when staff do this survey, you know, you could also see things that like, oh, that does go to remuneration. Something we have to remember often is we are independent contractors, not staff of the RDCK. So any of those criteria around employment, even down to benefits, not all of us have benefits. If we do, we have to buy into it. So we're not staff, and that does create a lot of wiggle room because you're independent. But do we put parameters in the remuneration bylaw? So I know Mike's listening, and I think when you create the survey, I think you'll be able to capture things that might come up that relate to other aspects, such as code of conduct, such as, you know, the response on recording votes. Mike, do you have any response at this time or anything you want to add to this? And we'll continue with the speakers list, but.
Thank you, Chair. I have responses for everything that I've heard. I'm taking lots of notes. And this will be reflected in the survey and what comes next. So unless there's any specific questions, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Sure.
We'll put you on for a second time, but we'll close this up soon, just because it's going to be an ongoing conversation. Director May, for a second.
My actual question was asked and answered, but I would like to point out that this particular item is obviously drawing a lot of reaction, and it needs to be discussed fully. I hope that is captured in the survey, but that we will also have a time and place to fully discuss it, because it seems like a tiny item, but it's huge. It has so many ramifications, some of which have been highlighted already today. So thank you.
So let me just go back to Mike for a minute to check on a timeline and the process. So we're initiating this conversation. We have a draft right now where we've highlighted the areas where we need further input. The survey is going to ask those questions with room for details. My assumption then, Mike, is we would be looking at this again, let's say in October, and then we would have the board discussion then. Is that roughly how it's going to work?
Yeah, quite likely we could have this back for October as long as there's timely participation in the survey. And noting, you know, last time we amended the procedures bylaw, it is a lengthy process. We want to make sure that there's opportunity for full debate and that staff is preparing the bylaw in accordance with the wishes of the board. So no specific timeline for having it adopted other than as staff, we will keep bringing this back in a timely manner until we have a finished product.
Okay, and hopefully at that time, this one item you're identifying Maine will have a lot more context to it based on survey responses, LGA requirements, any of those other things that we need to consider. So it's a really informed conversation. Vandenberg. Okay.
Thank you. Through the chair, good conversation. Yes, there is an opportunity to have more. I think it's necessary. Just want to reiterate the importance of the volunteer advisory groups. Discussion around what they are providing to the table and procedures that are more customized for the participation, I think is important in this. You can't group them into the same procedures that we have. They're a volunteer group. If we don't look at customizing something that's more appropriate for them, we're going to lose them. And we're hearing that loud and clear through our neck of the woods. And they've got good reasons why. So I just wanted to reiterate, kind of tack on to what Director Jackman is saying in that regard.
Thank you. So we do have an advisory committee bylaw, and again, this will be one where the advisory committee definition would be defined in the procedures bylaw, but their mandate and how they operate would be in the advisory committee bylaw. But we can highlight those things, like let's double back and make sure that they're reflective of what was raised here. So there are two separate bylaws. Mike, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll just add that advisory committee bylaw that we have for water specifically outlines different meeting procedures, and it's far less formal than the meeting requirements that are included in the procedures bylaw. So by design, these advisory committees are meant to be far simpler, far less formal, and more geared around generating community feedback than moving business along, I guess is a good way to describe it. So I think what we currently have in place and what we'll continue to put forward as we head in this direction more, or if we do that, would be simplifying the procedures and making sure that we're setting up processes that would make it as easy as possible for community members to participate and provide feedback.
Do you want that bylaw circulated to Director Vandenberg? I think we adopted it either at the beginning of this term or late in the last term.
I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you, because I missed something there.
No problem. I'll make a note of that, or Mike may have already made a note of it. We'll make sure we get it locked with and then pop up for a second time, and then we're gonna take our morning break.
I don't have anything to add, or question, but what I wanted to say is that the policy that we just went through that was sent out 4 or 5 questions, only 7 people responded.
Right.
So I've heard 11 people speak on this. I'm really looking forward to seeing that there's 20 people respond on this. That's all.
Thank you. And I think that's part of why I suggested October instead of September. I'll fully admit that I completely missed this survey. It was likely during when stuff was going off, so they can be missed. So it's really good news. We don't have a hard stop on the timeline on this. We can get it right and do it well. And I'll pay more attention to those surveys that come out because I missed it. Full disclosure.
I don't know who that's it, but only 7 responded.
Pop up for the second time?
Yeah, just a question, I think Director Hugh had brought it up, does attendance in person really belong in the procedures bylaw, or should it be in the remuneration bylaw?
Well, electronic attendance is in the procedures bylaw because it outlines what procedures are acceptable or not. Remuneration would be separate to how you're remunerated.
I'm particularly talking about in person. So, we have the option right now to either participate virtually or in person. So, to keep that option is great, but the in-person part more than likely would belong in the remuneration bylaw. An example that was given, if you're away for 6 months on a holiday, then your remuneration can be cut back.
Well, I think they, through the survey, can flag those things that again would go in a separate bylaw, but we do need to keep the parameters around electronic participation in a procedures bylaw.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, that was a really good initial conversation on it. Director Cunningham, did you have a question? You're looking at me like.
No, I was just wondering, doesn't the act say something about attendance at meetings? Doesn't it say something if you missed more than 3 meetings or something like that?
Yes, there are the act considerations, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, that would be reflected in different, likely in their remuneration bylaw, but that's also an LGA requirement as an elected official. Okay, Mike, did you get everything you need at this point to be able to draft a survey for us? Do you have anything you need? Or Ange, I know you've been working on this too.
Nothing more from me at this time. Ange?
Okay. Good, okay. All right, folks, let's take, let's do 7.2. Because that's for adoption for area G, and we know that you are in the room and you've been so patient. I forgot it wasn't, you've got 2, so this is 1, and then we'll have a rule affairs 1. Director Cunningham.
Oh, yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh, point of order.
Oh, yes.
I believe there was an option, there was a resolution to do more consideration in our options for that one. There's option 1 and 2. One was to go ahead and start doing first and second, and the other option was to do additional.
For the procedures bylaw?
Yeah.
Yeah, staff are requesting that they do a survey, and that is fine under direction.
We don't
of staff.
need to, okay, we don't need to pass it.
I think there's more sleuthing to do before we would move.
Yeah, I
first
thought
and
that was
second.
the motion to do this.
Yeah, okay. So Cunningham on 7.2.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendation for 7.2, the land use amendment bylaw 2935, be amended by 2452. And hereby adopted, Chair's corporate officer authorized to sign, and I'd like to speak to it if there's a second.
It's for adoption, so you can't speak to it once you move the motion.
So can I speak to it before I move them?
Yeah, I won't take a second. Go ahead and speak to
Okay,
it.
thank you. I want to speak to it because it is adoption, but I also wish to be realized that we went through all the other procedures before, in other words, all the things necessary for the adoption. So it's just not just appearing here as a 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Okay, and do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Good to see you again. 7.3, this did have quite a bit of work on it. Do we have debate? If we don't, we'll just go ahead with it. If we do, we'll take a break. Cunningham?
Oh, minor change. Could we change it to public notices, both in the name of the bylaw and in the announcements? Because as a public notice, we think it's something, it's about public notices plural. Could we add yes to that?
I don't know that makes a difference, does it? That's fine.
Because it is about public notices, if you get more than one.
Okay, Graham?
My only comment here is under 3, where it says electronically posting on Facebook. Could we change Facebook to social media?
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
So, through the chair, the reason why we can't put social media is as part of, so section 94.2 in the community charter clearly states what we put, we must advertise. So if we're saying social media, it means Facebook, Twitter, you know, like whatever it's
Instagram,
social media platforms there is.
True.
Also, sorry, through the chair, also through the chair, the province looks at Facebook as being an appropriate means to communicate, where they don't think Twitter or other social media platforms is an appropriate way to communicate to your to the public. So that was another reason why we couldn't add the word social media. If we choose platforms, another social media platform, we will have to amend the bylaw.
Go ahead.
Supplemental, there's some communities that have their own social media sites, like Parrot Proctor Google groups, for example. So that's why I was thinking where people actually, a lot of people don't go to Facebook, but do go to that site. So that's where I'm thinking.
I think what Andrew's saying is that we would have to specifically name which social media groups we would be posting to, and Google, from a privacy perspective, we cannot access.
Okay.
Me.
Yeah, I'm looking at the proposed bylaw, and there had been, I know that there has been quite a bit of discussion last time about non-electronic postings, and the fact that the RDCK physical bulletin board is located in one place, is not accessible to so many of our people. In the experiences of the past month and the feedback that I'm getting from people, many of whom don't even use electronic communications and were being left out of information that they really needed to have. I think I would like to see some more highlight and some more specifics around where we post physically and how we post non-electronically to our constituents.
So just to clarify, this is only for public notices. These are legislatively required public notices. This is not our EOC updates. This is not any other aspect. This is only public notices that this bylaw refers to. Those other things I don't believe are constrained.
I remain.
What is it you're wanting to see change? Can you just be specific?
Posted on the public notice posting page.
On the public notice posting page?
Yeah.
You would like that?
No, I would like that expanded to. The problem I'm having with it is that it is too specific and too limited in terms of what many of our constituents have access to. Even, you know, yes, I understand this is just, you know, for public notices, but it still is not communicating.
But the bylaw includes all the other places we can post it. That's only one of the options. So I'm just trying to understand which place is not named that you would like it posted. can you add Paige and I believe pop off? There's a couple people throwing their hands up. So if you can, I'll come back to you. Just be very specific about the area that you want it posted that is not listed. Because that's just one option. There's other options in there, like the electronic, the Facebook, things like that. So I'll come back to you. Okay. And obviously, we're gonna debate this. So who was next on the list? Paige, go ahead.
Okay, just working this out in my own mind in terms of availability to people physically in communities. You're essentially considering something at a public location, like all the city halls of all the various communities, having some relationship. And because otherwise it's fairly unworkable to have staff running around putting posts everywhere. So
Yeah.
that would be something specific that potentially, I'm not sure that's executable in the long term, but that would be something specific about expanding public notices, is that our cities and towns and parts of the federation would also post our public notices.
So you're asking to add what in?
Well, and I would say that would be the consideration of something specific.
What? Can you be specific?
That we establish relationships with the municipalities within the RDCK so that they're also posting our public notices on their public notice boards, and we'd have to talk to everybody.
So I believe we do that. Is that not named in this? Go ahead, Ange.
So through the chair, this is what staff can do.
Yeah.
We have to rely on the municipalities to do the other aspect of things. And if that doesn't happen,
Yeah.
then that is part of our bylaw and we're not meeting our legislative requirements.
Yeah.
So this is what staff can do at our level. We can, so for instance, with the West Creston fire send vote, our communications is in Creston. Our posters, our notices are going to that Creston office and to the rec complex, so that that information is in that community. Right. That's what we can do because that is one of our facilities. That is, you know, it's happening in that area. We can't rely on the municipality staff to meet the requirements of our bylaw. And
Yeah. So it does it prohibit us from asking them to do that if it's not in the bylaw? So that's where, like, I get notices get posted on the Meadow Creek Store bulletin board. It's not identified in this notice, but we can go beyond what this says. This is just the bare minimum. If you don't meet it, you gotta start all over again.
Good.
So I'm actually going to stick to our morning break. We have a speakers list after this. And I think what we need to consider is there was a survey, 7 people responded. We're now hearing there's quite a bit more on it. So we're either gonna refer this or we're gonna be prepared with specific recommendations where we include those before first and second reading, but we won't be able to adopt if we change it today. Is that correct?
To the chair, and the fact that you've already done first and second read.
That's right. Oh, it's third time today. So we, depending on how many recommendations you want to change or add, we're gonna take a break. You'll be first on the list when we get back.
I just wanted to say you can take me off of this because
Oh, okay.
the point has been.
Thank you.
720, that's all I can say. Okay, welcome back to those online. Mike, we'll go to you in just a second. I just want to make sure we've got David off. There's Director Pikes. And Weatherhead's still there, right? Oh, I don't see her there.
I'm here. Sorry, Mike.
Okay, there you are.
I forgot to turn my video back on.
Oh, no problem. I just didn't actually see your name listed, so I was just making sure you're there. Okay. Cunningham, you had.
Yes, thank you. In our public notice stuff, do we have?
Oh, sorry, if we're not going there yet. I'll put you on the list. If that's what you want to ask about, I'll put you on the list.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about it.
Okay, can you put Cunningham on the list, please? Yeah, public notice. There is a list already, so we're just adding you to it. And I'm sorry, Mike wanted to provide a bit of an overview on this, and I didn't see his hand previously, so we're gonna go to Mike. And then our speakers list is Paige, Popoff, Vandenberg,
Oh,
Cunningham.
I think Paige spoke, sorry.
Okay.
I'm good.
And I do want to suggest that if we're going to continue to say we want different things, that this gets referred, and we'll ask you to please respond to the survey and provide further input. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Okay, thank you through the chair. I did have I wanted to make a few points in relation to the issues that Director Graham brought up, just with regard to reaching community places where people congregate online and share information. We do actually have in place mechanisms to try and reach people in those community forums. There's a number of sort of procedural pieces, and it's unfortunate that Dan isn't here today to be able to speak to specifically what we do, but there's a number of things that we undertake always to try and amplify our message. And certainly with the launch of the new website, and hopefully with the adoption of this bylaw, we'll formalize those things a little bit more. But we do, as I understand it, when we post things to Facebook, it's sent out to the admins of community notice boards and Facebook groups. And it's their decision whether or not to post it, but we do try and make sure that the message reaches people where they're at. And also too, and I believe this is in the report that goes with the bylaws, that the new website is going to have an email subscription service for lots of different kinds of notifications from the RDCK, but people can opt into notifications. So we're going to want to make sure that we've got all of the municipalities on there, and anyone else who's interested in the work of the RDCK can sign up to be automatically notified by email when new things are posted there. So those are all procedural pieces that really don't belong in the bylaw. They're operational in nature, and we do need to be careful with the bylaw to being too specific about the methods of communication that we have here, because it's important that we're able to comply with the bylaw that we create. So if we're too specific and say, for instance, require that all of our notices be posted in municipal halls, Angela's already noted that we don't control we don't have any control over that process. So we want to make sure that we're not being specific about those things, so that we're not being put offside with the bylaw. And noting too that, part of the reason for this bylaw coming forward is that the publication schedule with newspapers was preventing us from, in some cases, complying with our legislative requirement. So we do want to not be too granular in detail with what we put in the bylaw, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Director Popoff, we're next on the list.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was the only director that said 2 weeks. And the reason I said that 2 weeks is to cover the Slocan Valley, we publish, the Valley Voice publishing once every 2 weeks. So that would only be 2 publications. So I don't know if that can be incorporated in the bylaw, or would that be operational? And that's the question through the chair. So you're only publishing it twice in the Valley Voice, and that Valley Voice gets delivered to every mailbox in the Slocan Valley. Many residents do not have Facebook access or even internet. So that's one way of reaching the residents in Area H, and probably even beyond that.
Mike, do you want to explain the conflict that occurred with that?
Angela has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, thanks. Ange, go ahead.
Yes, through the chair. So as of now, section 94.1 of the community charter identifies 2 consecutive weeks. So with the Valley Voice, we provide the publication. They publish it for that 2-week period. And then, so if we were to do 2 publications, that would be 4 weeks. And so we're not meeting that criteria in the Local Government Act. So we do the 1 publication, which is for that 2-week period, which is meeting the criteria in the public notice bylaw that we put forward. And it allows us that ability to not have to worry about that 2 consecutive weeks aspect of it.
So essentially what you're saying is if we did 2 publications, we're looking at a 4-week timeline.
And that doesn't, well, that would be exceeding our, I guess, what is considered in the Local Government Act of
30 days.
the 2 consecutive weeks. So 14 days, it would become 28 days of advertising.
So that was the conflict with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's supplemental if I may, and I do realize that the bylaw was basically a conflict. But can we not make this an operational procedure? Because you're not actually publishing every day for 2 weeks. You're only publishing twice.
The conflict is you then extend the timeline to 4 weeks based on their publication timeline. And so, and generally when you're doing a public notice, it's a 30-day timeline. And that's part of the LGA, I believe.
It's dependent on what we're doing.
What the item is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll let staff respond to what Director Paul was requesting.
Yeah, you know, it's, that's why I said it might not be adequate, you know, it will conflict if we put it in the bylaw. Can we not make that an operational procedure?
Mike, I see you unmuted.
Yes, through the chair, we could, and that's probably a better place to leave it, because, you know, if we're doing the 2 publications on a matter that's time sensitive, you know, the second one might not run until after the matter is being decided by the board if it was something that we were giving notice on. So, you know, I think where relevant, you know, we could note there's a desire for 2 publications for that publication specifically, or all publications that have, you know, a longer publishing cycle. But, you know, again, the bylaw requirement, I believe, should remain as the one publishing cycle.
So am I to understand that we can make that as an operational procedure, not specifically in the bylaw?
Yes, just know that the minimum would be achieved. It's not guaranteed the operational goal you're suggesting is going to be achieved, that there's limitations to it. So it'd be operational when possible, we'll do it. It's not always going to be possible. And it means that if we don't meet it, we're not deficient on the bylaw requirements. Okay.
Fully understood. Thank you.
Okay. Vandenberg.
Right, thank you, through the chair. Mike has answered that which I was going to bring forward, which is the email subscription and how that works so well in other jurisdictions. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and Cunningham.
Yes, just a question. We send these to libraries, don't we? Staff? We send out the public notices to libraries, just as a matter of. If not, perhaps that could be included in the file.
So through the chair, that would be a question for Dan. I'm not sure what all the entities he sends out to. He may not. I haven't heard of that, but Dan may.
So that you would have the same limitation that you would in getting it, if you listed in the bylaw, similar to a municipality posting it, if they don't, we then have not met the bylaw. So I wouldn't name libraries in this because we don't operate those libraries. There's no control on it actually happening, but I have seen them in the Castle Library. So I do know that he does send them far and wide.
Thank you, that's what I want to know.
Okay. So then are we ready to go to third and adoption? I'm not hearing any changes to what we just clarified more so. McLaren Co.
I'm ready to move.
Okay,
Third and adoption.
thank you.
Second 3 readings.
The 3 readings, thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the next motion for adoption?
Move adoption.
Thank you, McLaren Co. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, area F, this is for adoption. Go ahead, Director Newell.
Sorry.
That's okay. 7.4.
I'll move the recommendation regarding the library contribution service establishment amendment bylaw for adoption.
Thank you, Pencroft. This is adoption, no discussion. All those in favor? No discussion on adoption, sorry. Anybody opposed? Okay, what's your question, Vandenberg?
It is to do with 7.4, 7.5. It's something that I'm just realizing. How is it in Creston Valley different than what's happening in 7.4, 7.5 here, which is a value by bylaw contribution to the library. I think I understand that correctly. And how is it different in Creston in our situation? It's got me intrigued a little bit.
Through the chair, I think the difference in Crescent is not only do you supply funding for the Crescent Valley Library, but there's also the reading centers that are funded for that service. We own the library building, so there's an asset in that service. There's a lot more going on in that service than the contribution services where it is strictly a dollar amount that's paid to the city of Nelson to fund the library.
Supplemental to this?
It's not a topic on the agenda specific to Crescent Valley, so
Then
one
I'll take
question.
Take it off, sorry.
Okay, take it offside. Crescent Valley Services is a good one for that. Area H, pop off, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move adoption of the bylaw number 2970 that reflects our financial contribution to the service.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Hannah Graff, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. East West Hoist, this is for first, second, and third. Jackman, go ahead.
I have a question because of the two projects that are tied in here, the timelines could still be years apart since one is tied to the land acquisition. Are we allowed, how many draws on these funds? We're not going to adoption right now. This is 3 readings, but once we adopt, we draw in increments of, a few $100,000 at a time, just through the chair of the CEO. What are our options once we do adopt?
Through the chair, once adoption is done, you have 5 years to pull the amounts on here, and you can do them at any value you want. You would just create a new security issuing bylaw every time you want to draw funds.
And supplemental then, adoption is not before us right now because of our uncertainty about the timelines today, or is this bounce to the province?
Through the chair, it goes to the ministry before we can do adoption on this one.
The other one does not. I will move for second, third reading on this recommendation.
Thank you. Second, any discussion? Member?
Just clarity, when we were talking about this, we were talking in terms of 1.3 is the capital cost on this. The bylaw is extending that to different numbers. Can Uli tell me what is it that we're approving? Because our conversation was around 1.3 million for capital assets, and this bylaw is not 1.3 million-ish.
Julie, are you there? Stuart, do you have it?
2 projects, Chair.
Yeah.
There's 2 projects that do total as in terms of what we have cash on hand, what we are authorized to borrow through the research recovery plan.
Okay.
We're looking to tap up to what we're authorized under the research recovery plan.
Does that answer your question, Director Vandenberg?
I understand that, but that's not Crescent Septage receiving station is a specific item. I don't see the valuation reflected in that bylaw.
So through the chair, a good way to look at it is take a look at the next item, 7.7, which is a security issuing bylaw. It breaks out more detail as to what you're pulling the funds for. Whereas the loan authorization bylaw can be on a more consolidated basis. All you have to do is indicate how much you wish to borrow in total and the projects you're borrowing for. When you get to the security issuing bylaw, you need to be more specific as to what you're going for so they know where it's going. So when the SI bylaw is prepared for the septage, it'll break out that 1.3. And then when it's for the closure project, it'll break out the other 1.5 separately. But for the purposes of the loan authorization bylaw, we can display it this way.
Angela?
So through the chair, for the other 2, the west and the central loan authorizations that we've gone to 3 readings on. My apologies, the one even previous, so it was the west for the Nakusp and Slocan transfer station. When we provided that to the province after 3 readings, we had broken down the projects in the bylaw, the loan authorization bylaw, and the ministry actually asked us to rescind 3rd reading and do it again without it broken down. So they just really want that total cost, not the 2 projects identified in the loan authorization, just as Stuart said. So the province actually even sent it back to us when we did do that.
And to clarify, the security issuing bylaw is where you get those details.
Exactly.
Okay. Vandenberg, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does in terms of the format and why it's the way it is, but we, in our discussion, were concerned about what those costs really mean, that we should be looking at validating those costs or revisiting those costs, which we never did. And so, but this is saying, we'll just go ahead with it. I'm kind of uncomfortable with that.
Well, the resource recovery plan process is where those were all identified.
Yep, and I had raised a concern about how we got to that. And my concern was around, we need to be looking at external sources for funding because this is not affordable. So maybe that's a different conversation, but I'm just being honest that what's going on here?
Okay, well, it's difficult. The resource recovery plan was a 7-year process with lots of stakeholders involved. And so we don't recant those when we have a new elected official. So there's a lot of background to get caught up on, and I'll just leave it to you to speak to your East Resource Recovery Chair around any conversations you might have at that table or at joint. Further discussion. Jackman.
Will that not be clarified when we go to make the first draw? Because say big rec complex stuff, we had $15, $20 million we could draw, but we're very specific. We're now ready to draw this for this. Possible similar service. So when we make the draw, we'll have much that we won't know why and more time. We're gonna pull the money, which we give it to the town. We're gonna supplement it with revenues as we discussed the other day from tipping fee,
right,
discharge fees. That comes at that next stage, and we will need updated numbers for all of that, I agree, at that stage.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Recorded, please.
Reported opposed?
Yes.
Okay. You got that, Ange? Bylaw 2974 West Waste Management Subregion. You would like to take that one, off.
Yeah, I'll move the recommendation that the West Management Subregion Refuse Disposal Recycling Service at Cuspin Slocan Transfer Station Security Issuing Bylaw number 2974/2024 be read first, second, and third time with content.
Do a second. Thank you, Maine. Discussion.
Yes, I think we discussed it with the previous bylaw.
Thank you. I definitely learned when I looked at these two bylaws, why were they so different? And I figured security issuing is one, loan authorization is another. You don't pull on loan until you're ready for what you need based on your budget and where you may have pulled from others. So it was,
Yeah,
I learned some stuff.
yeah, and I believe staff explained that,
Yeah.
so we don't have to go through that explanation.
Further discussion on this one. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And
We'll move the second recommendation for adoption.
thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, Regional Growth Management Planning Analysis Project. We have a motion. The report was pretty well done.
I'll move the recommendation. I do have a question.
I'm sorry, Jackman, what was that?
I'll move the recommendation, but I'd like to ask a question later.
Okay, so moved, seconded by Hannah Graff, and then we have Graham and Jackman.
So thank you. So through the chair, in looking at this proposal, it is for $234,922 for 1,275 hours of work, which means it's $184.25 an hour. So my question to staff is, I guess in looking at this and seeing that this is all going to Vancouver and Alberta companies, I'm wondering if there was ever any approach for any local businesses to bid in this. That's my first question.
Sangita, do you have the?
Through the chair, can you highlight what was asked? That's just one.
So the Regional Growth Management Analysis Project, where we're awarding the contract, the question is, were there local bidders on that project? It would have went to RFP, so did we?
And it would have been posted to BC bid, so it would have been open to anybody. across the province and across the country to bid on it.
And did anybody locally bid on it?
I don't think so. I mean, all of, Urban Systems, I believe, locally, their office, but they didn't have the capacity. Or they informed us they didn't have the capacity to submit a bid, so they weren't actually on the list, as I recall.
Okay, so supplemental, did we consider doing this like in-house by hiring a couple of other GIS people, considering that we have such a large GIS department? Or such a large budget for GIS?
Through the chair, the analysis that's required is more comprehensive than what GIS could do at a point. It would also involve planners working with the GIS staff, so it might as well be an internal project. And by going to a consultant using grant funding, we're taking some of that work away from our staff to do other things and work on other projects.
Can I have another supplemental? Can my other supplemental would be like, there's gonna be a lot of staff time involved in this anyway, because these guys from Vancouver couldn't possibly know like things about our communities, like they're gonna have to be getting in touch with staff to get all of this. Do we have any idea of how much staff time is gonna be involved in this?
So through the chair, our bylaws and our GIS currently hold information about our zoning and OCPs. So that will be information that we can give to the consultant. And then our planners will be working, yes, one of the planners will be working with the consultant to help them interpret that information and you know, provide them any additional details that they may need. But I don't anticipate it will take a lot of staff time. I recall in the report, Dan may have identified how much staff hours, but maybe not, but it won't be significant, like it's not a full FTE amount of work.
Thank you.
Jackman?
Oh, sorry. On this one, I was looking back on the other one. This is big money, as indicated by Director Graham, and the scope is pretty big. What I did from it, like Dan and the way she put it, sort of talking about more complete communities. We brought thing, reducing sprawl. Well, good luck in our electoral areas, but very big topic. Focus on diversity of housing and allow more diverse mix of land uses, which I'm really interested in because I think we have too many residential zones, for example. So questions are, there's so much here and so many components. What are the interim reports going to look like? Are we going to get to see that this consultant over this 1,200 hours has kind of broadly pigeonholed these areas as being the more complete community hubs versus other ones who are not going to look at Crawford Bay? Even if people in Crawford Bay might say, wow, Perry might get shut down and we're stuck. We'd like to be a complete community. Are we going to get interim reports? How's it going to be chunked out? You may not have the answer today, but how are we going to see this roll out over whatever amount of time this takes? As I assume, and then the other question, what is time in the contract? 6 months, 12 months? I want to see incremental sort of indicators where this is going as the $300,000 is spent.
Yeah.
So through the chair, I don't recall the timeline, but it's based on the funders' requirement for when we report out on the project, and I believe it's still March. But I could be wrong and I would have to confirm that. As far as providing information, interim reports, yes, I believe that's built into the contract. Similar to the work we did with Macola, they would be required to come and present to the board. I'll have to look at the terms of the contract to give you more definite answers. If that's what the board would request, I can provide that after the meeting.
You'd like to see that, okay. Can you add the room to the list? Is that me? Yep, okay. I struggle with this one, not because I don't think that, you know, doing this analysis is helpful to understanding where we can focus servicing and where those opportunities are. But I struggle because 40 to 50% of our area is unzoned and has no servicing. And so if we're only providing the bylaws and what currently is in place as a land use regulation, that means we're missing a large chunk of the region where development is occurring, where there is homes being concentrated with no servicing and no mechanisms to provide things like, is this residential, is this industrial, is this business? So it's kind of my constant comment. I feel like we're going ahead on all these initiatives that are great in an urban setting, but in our rural setting where we have half of our region with no land use planning, no zoning, we're missing a big chunk of where there's actually serious issues. So what I would like to know is, if it's limited to providing bylaws and land use regulations, how are we then working with the consultants on all those areas that are not addressed through those? I can mention many times that the 24 unincorporated communities in Area D, one of them has zoning. We all have building code, we all have floodplain bylaw, but it does not address the concentration of places being built in places like Cooper Creek, where there's zero water, zero any servicing, no fire servicing. So what are we doing to incorporate what needs might be considered there?
So through the chair, I noticed Stephanie is on the call and Dana is on maternity leave. So Stephanie can maybe answer the questions that Director Jackman and maybe Director Graham asked. In regards to this project, the intent is to look, and Stephanie can further enhance my comments here. As you mentioned, we have some sprawl, and sprawl is an issue in a lot of rural areas. That's just the nature of urban areas. Our region is quite large, and our sprawl, as you know, creates many different service areas to be established, or creates that. Sorry, my train of thought here. Creates the impression that we have many communities out there that require unique services. And so I think what we want to do in this project is find out where our communities currently are in regards to servicing requirements, and then how we can further enhance those communities for servicing requirements. And then look at other areas that are growing. Sorry, I'm turning red. I'm trying to figure out what I'm saying. And look at other, but I have my train of thought back. And look at other areas where we see growth happening and continue to work on informing the board on future servicing and growth potential in those areas. So this isn't just limited to urban areas or adjacent to urban areas. It's looking at our rural areas as well. And you mentioned Cooper Creek. I mean, the population there is low. Maybe the servicing that the regional district provides there are minimal beyond what we already do. And to inform future growth in those areas, if there was potential for growth, we need to understand what their needs are. And this project helps to inform some of that. It's just the first, again, another layer of information to help inform those bigger decisions on where we want to grow. And that includes water services, resource recovery services, and fire services, et cetera. So I'll let Stephanie explain that a little bit more, if she can answer the questions that were posed by the other.
Okay, and I just want to articulate my question because it wasn't answered. And that is, if we are only providing the bylaws and the land use regulations in place, we are not going to capture the local context data that is not captured by us because we have no regulations in place. So I'm wanting to know, how is the consultant going to know what Cooper Creek might need, because there's no land use regulations. There's nothing that would trigger them in a bylaw being even considered, as well as the other 23 communities in Area D. So that's my question. How are they going to get that data? Can you add a page to the list? And I'll ask Stephanie, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Watson. I've been writing down all of the board's comments, and I don't necessarily have an answer for you at this meeting as to how we are going to capture that in this project, but that's great information for me to bring back to the future potential consulting team that would work on this project. One of the reasons why the contract award reviewing group chose Liquor Geospatial Consulting was their experience in doing this type of work. And some of our directors may recall the workshop that we had, the planning workshop back in January, February of this year, And we had members of the Cowichan Valley Regional District present, and Liquor Geospatial Consulting assisted with their regional growth analysis. So they have a very niche expertise in this field, and we can put that question to them. I just wanted to respond to Director Jackman as well about the interim reporting. The consulting team, should the regional board award the contract to Liquor Geospatial, will be coming forward with a communications and engagement plan, so we can help build that in to the reporting, including when we come back and share interim reports with the regional board, and also the piece Director Watson, Chair Watson, about how do we incorporate that 40 to 50% of the rural land area that doesn't have land use regulations, and how would this project speak to those areas. So well noted here by planning.
Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate that. Yeah, my concern with the Cowichan example is they have wall-to-wall land use regulations. So I'm just really trying to identify all those areas that fall outside the box that are waiting for land use regulations and have been for over 6 years. Vandenberg, did you have a page on there?
Thank you, through the chair. So one of the things that I think there's a missed opportunity here, and particularly in the section 1, the executive summary, is that the growth management plan is an important piece of informing local government in alignment with their OCPs, their policies and procedures. That's not talked about in here. That's the reason, one of the reasons. So my question is, why are we doing this? And that ought to have been reflected in the report. If this was a proper business case, the other things that would come out on it is the potential outcomes, addressing what is it we're trying to achieve and what are the outcomes we're going to measure from this investment into this growth plan. And it would have addressed Chair Watson's concern as well. It should have about what does this how will this information reflect on non-owned properties. That again is not reflected in this report. So I just want to say that the report is the intent of a regional growth plan is important because of its need to inform OCP policies and procedures, but it's not reflected in this report. It's not transparent enough for the public to understand why this investment is important and what we intend the outcomes to do and how it's going to inform our decision making in the future. So an opportunity is lost here because we're not following, perhaps, we're not following a business case format.
Can you add Len to the list? Sangeeta or Stephanie, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you. Through Chair Watson, I guess when I'm looking at this project and the intent is to identify areas for targeted growth, working with 7 out of 9 of our regional member municipalities. This is sort of the first step that would inform those higher level planning documents like an official community plan. So I believe that this work is valuable work that needs to be done so that we understand where we can grow within our region, and that would in future form either new official community plans, update existing official community plans, but this is the key technical analysis that would be required so we could make those changes in either existing community plans or create new community plans for particular areas. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Supplemental?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. All I'm saying is that that's exactly what this work should be doing. All I'm saying is that in terms of the public reading, how we're investing this money, those comments, that narrative is missing. And it should be a part of it.
Through the chair, thank you for that clarification and point noted.
Thanks, Stephanie. Director Devin.
I'm just wondering through the chair to staff, do we have, are we clear what's in scope and what's out of scope? And I can clearly identify an impediment to growth in the crested area, and that's the agricultural land reserve. We know how much land we have. We know what we need to do in it, but what we need to do is deal with the impediments to growth, which if we could have some adjustment to the agricultural land reserve,
we could do a lot of things that right now we cannot do. And so I just hope that's addressed in this, and it's clear that, how we can address that, because it's something that, we're going to be fighting, forever, and it does, keeps us from growing.
I see Stephanie taking notes. Do you want to comment about Stephanie? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Watson. This is a tough one because I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know the outcome of the technical analysis, but what this could be is a tool for the town of Creston and rural Creston to use with the Agricultural Land Commission moving forward, but I don't know that at this stage. Thank you.
But it could inform that type of advocacy and work to address ALR and its disparity in being productive.
And I would hope it does, because we have a lot of requests for just a simple thing like more sports fields. No room in our community, room outside the community. ALR is right up against us and tells us no all the time. We have a lot of requests for, we could be the tournament capital of the Kootenay if we had a field. Can't get the field because of ALR. So that's part of growth, but it's also part of community and business. We're hoping that we can have some flexibility.
Thank you. Director Weatherhead.
Thank you. Yeah, echoing a lot of what I'm hearing here, but also too, on the surface, you know, when I look at Area K on the surface, there seems, you know, some, obvious choices of where we might grow, but you know, when we get under the layers, we discover all of these barriers in place, even with land use planning in place. So I just can't see that level of digging in something like this. This doesn't seem applicable to my area. Am I correct on that? Through the chair to Stephanie.
Thank you. Through the chair, Director Weatherhead, perhaps maybe you could help clarify with more, I guess, specific parameters that you're thinking this particular project might not be valuable for Area K. Just a little more clarification on your inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I can see defined Area K, surrounding the village of Nakus is maybe fitting. When I look down at my southern region, I've got barriers such as floodplain, then I've got water service, then I've got water services that cannot be added onto, then I've got sewage system that cannot be added onto because of BC Hydro. Those types of things that where we go, oh, this seems like a great little community, let's grow folk here. And it's like, oh, stop sign right in place. And yet, private planner came to me about one property, asking me some questions. And when he found out what were the underlying reasons that he was going to run into with this client, that he started to feel that it was maybe best in his best interest to advise his client against investing there. And that was not my intention of just giving him the straight bill of goods, but that was just, the sewage system was a big no. And so and that would be something they'd have to take up with. So I just don't see a survey like this, the amount of work in terms of really customizing this per area. I can understand the target growth areas, but on the surface, as I'm saying, this target growth areas for my area, what they look like underneath is not such the case.
Thank you. Through Chair Watson. Some of these questions, I've been writing them all down, are very valuable to provide that feedback to our consulting team should the contract be awarded. And so I don't have the answers that you're seeking at this stage because we haven't undertaken the actual technical analysis. For some areas, this project will really be a focus on those fringe planning areas. So Director Weatherhead, you mentioned Nakus. We're looking at future potential opportunities to co-locate housing that has both the physical and social infrastructure to create that diversity of housing options, in particular growth areas. And it's really a long-term vision and alignment of servicing requirements. The big ones for our region, as we well know, are water and servicing. So This would be a long-term vision that then various official community plans could adopt, and we could look at increasing our infrastructure capacities for build out over, the next 50, 75 years. So I appreciate what you're saying, and in particular rural areas, this project may be working more closely with a village or a city or town in a particular electoral area. But as we all know, there are smaller communities which will be incorporated into this planning work as well. So some of that information I won't have until we're into the technical analysis at this stage, but I appreciate that feedback.
I think because it builds on what Director Weatherhead is asking, I think Stephanie, part of the gap is going to be that a lot of the servicing that she was referencing is not within the RDCK. So there does need to be a connection to those community operated aspects that are their limitations or opportunities, but they're not held in our own information. They're not our services, especially in the waterfront. Septage, I believe, would likely, if she has a sewer service, that's independent. So I think that it's trying to capture those areas that are outside of anything under our bylaws and land use regulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So we have Paige, Len, Graham, and David off, and we're going to run out of time. So Paige, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation. I wanted to lift a few things, if I may, from the RFP itself. So the RFP we put out that this proponent has put in for is that we're going to prepare and understand the community goals and meet with all the community partners and establish their vision and goals and relevant work that they are looking to do. That the scope will be defined and meet with the consultant partners and finalize a study area with the entire region in focus, but the entire region will focus on fringe areas. That will also develop a community and engagement strategy. That the geographical and demographic information will be collected, that there will be a review and analysis of indicators around housing, transportation, and daily needs and infrastructure. That those will be mapped, they will be analyzed, and different test scenarios of growth will be put forward in the reports and what trade-offs might come with different types of actions. And that we will develop an implementation plan that includes direction on supporting proposed growth, such as asset management, servicing, and public transportation needs, general guidance on factors such as servicing that will need to be provided to those growth nodes. And it kind of goes into a little bit more detail around monitoring and feedback. So much of what I've heard around the table, I think gets captured in this RFP in terms of identifying actions on the other end of this analysis and mapping process of what are the limits to growth, where growth is best. There's a whole scoring matrix that apparently will come forward from my understanding of this RFP to understand, where are the easy wins and where are the difficult wins. So I heard a lot of the table around land use planning bylaws, but I see within this that would potentially be something that's identified is the lack of various foundational documents that might need work on in order to get to the point that we're aiming for. So there's a lot of technical detail. The only other point I wanted to add my weight to is, while we may not need a business case, really the concern is there enough detail about what's in the RFP in the report itself? Like, is it clear in the report what the end result is going to be after we've had all the workshops and everything else? And so I don't need another piece of paper to go with it. I probably just need that report to be a little bit more hefty in its intentions of what we're trying to accomplish, because it's certainly detailed in the RFP itself.
Thank you. Fun.
Sure. I'm very supportive of this. I think we've already voted to move forward with it, which is why our RFP up there. A couple of comments surrounding the rural areas about land use planning and zoning. I see this as an opportunity to do some planning. So rural directors understand their areas most, so that if there are potential opportunities for growth, it could be flagged with the limitations outlines. And then I just had a quick question. How many rural areas are like willing and wanting to do their land use planning and zoning, and just is kind of down the line? Like, are there actual rural areas out there that are wanting that and it's being funded down the line. Because I see that as an art regional district, that work should be prioritized in some way.
I can speak for Area D that I've been waiting for about 6 years. And it'll come, we have a planning workshop or a planning referral that was referred through rural affairs that we have yet to complete. But there's definitely, I believe, 3 rural areas that have motions in the work plan to develop land use planning regulations. And then others are also on a timeline where like, area A is quite outdated. So there's outdated ones. There's ones where directors have actually specifically put it in the work plan due to growth that's occurring with no land use regulation, which is the opposite to where growth can occur. It's occurring without regulation. So that's the complement to that. So yes, there are areas that have both been put in the work plan as well as very updated OCPs or land use regulations. Staff want to add anything to that?
Graham. Okay, I'll be quick. Thank you through the chair. So I see a huge challenge here with the alignment of the long-term water and servicing requirements when there's hundreds of water systems that are not registered in the region. So that I see as a huge challenge. I also do think that it would have been a benefit to have a local company that had some local knowledge. So that's not happening here. And now I can't remember what my third point was. So I don't have it.
David Opp.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the city of Castlegar and Area I are just in the final stages of completing, and I'm not sure if the city's adopted their official community plan, but it's pretty close if it isn't. And we're ready to adopt our community plan, official community plan. We've completed comprehensive reviews, and I guess a question to staff, I guess to Stephanie, because Stephanie knows our Area I OCP draft plan, and I know staff have also worked with the city of Castlegar. Like, how much could we realistically expect to add through this study that we already haven't done over, for example, in Area I over the last 8 years that we've been working on our OCP, and the city has done as well? Like, will it, like, I'm just struggling to see what additional information we're going to glean, because we already did all this stuff, I think, through the chair.
You go ahead, Steph.
Through the chair to Director Davidoff. I understand your question and where you're coming from with regards to all of the planning work we've undertaken through the Area I review project. I think this is an additional layer of technical analysis, and so the questions that you're asking, I would be unable to answer until we do that technical analysis. Just for the benefit of the board, it's my understanding that the city of Castlegar has adopted their new official community plan, and planning looks forward to bringing the draft Area I official community plan to the board in the fall for considerations of first and second readings. So we're well underway, but I think that those questions, Director Davidoff, we hope to answer through this process, working with our member municipalities as well. And I just wanted to dovetail off of Director Graham's comment, just as a reminder for the board that we do have local regional district planning staff that are part of this project as well. And we have intimate local knowledge of our rural areas. So we're part of this entire project. Thank you.
So, Chair, I have a supplemental to ask to planning staff, or I don't know, just a general question. If we had more knowledge about the technical aspects of this, and that came back to the board, it would help inform the board in making a decision to proceed with this. I mean, just because we have the money doesn't mean we have to proceed with everything that we get money for. So the bottom line is that, is there any benefit, and I'm asking through the chair to maybe Sangeeta, is there any benefit for us to kind of have staff acquire the technical knowledge and then come back and say, here's all the technical stuff, and now you can make a better informed decision? Or is this a time sensitive matter?
Well, I believe the project is to pay to get that technical information, is my understanding. Sangeeta or Stephanie?
Through the chair, I can maybe try to respond. The technical knowledge staff already have most of it. Where this project seeks to inform where there may be gaps and where there may be opportunities for growth. And so, as Stephanie explained, planning staff are going to be working along with the GIS staff on this. And so I don't see there being a gap as far as the technical information. If you're seeking to know what that technical information is, I can let Stephanie speak to that. I don't know if that'll be presented with an interim report or in a presentation by the consultant at some point. But again, just need more clarification on what do you mean when you say technical information and how do you want it represented?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Chair, I'm just sensing that there are more other directors other than myself that are kind of feeling a little bit like we're flying blind a little bit. And we're just taking on good faith. This is a good thing and let's proceed. We're going to learn more. But for the technical analyticals, I think it's a little bit fuzzy. So that's all. I'll stop there.
I think I want to acknowledge Dr. Page reading out the RFP, which we would have seen in a previous meeting, outlining specifics that, I think I understand when we get a report that's now we're awarding it, you don't go back and repeat everything you noted in the RFP outline. So I do think that that information is outlined in terms of what are we actually getting in the RFP. And thank you, Dr. Page, for reminding us about that. And then that's the actual information that's going to inform a lot of this. I don't think we misunderstand that component. It's just that when you have 20 jurisdictions, there's a lot of other areas that we're trying to address at the same time. So I'm hearing questions around what comes first, more so than not understanding that this is providing a level of detail that will inform how to do other things, such as housing and where to concentrate it. Stephanie, do you have anything you want to add to that? Am I incorrect, or by all means, give a different version?
Thank you, Chair Watson. Really, actually dovetailing off your comments, I think, my parting comment from planning, if I may, is that this is really a holistic growth management planning exercise, and it's something that our region hasn't undertaken before. So maybe that's why there's so many questions around the board table. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we need to move along.
Is there a motion on the floor?
Yes, there's a motion on the floor. I'm ready to take a vote.
Move, that we vote.
There's no other speakers on the list, so all those in favor. Anybody opposed? Recorded opposed, Graham. Thank you. Okay, the next item, 8.1.2, this was an external grant provided to the West Kootenay Coalition, Cycling Coalition. They will present in September. So if you have questions on the work they did, you can ask them at that time. We're not actually discussing this item at this time. 8.1.3, Local Government Climate Action Program. Again, received for our information. We're not looking for a decision at this meeting, but go ahead, Stuart.
If I could, through the chair, in reading this report, there's other information that you'd like to have in order to consider your decision in September. Please let staff know when we can update the report.
Okay. But the discussion on the report itself will be held in September. This is just giving us a month to digest.
That's right.
Okay. Graham?
Can I just ask a question? And this is maybe, sorry, through the chair, just because even with this report, I'm finding it hard to understand details. And I think this is all funneled through A108 to S100, which is very confusing for me and I'm sure others to follow. And there's a lot of money here. So I'm wondering, I guess this is just a question, maybe not appropriate right now, but was there ever or would there ever be a separate allocation account considered to manage climate action for the regional district for the purposes of transparency?
But through the chair, we manage it through its own reserve. So every in and out is managed through that reserve account in S100. It's a regional district reserve. It doesn't belong to development and community sustainability. That's where a number of the projects are. So that's why there's funds that go to A108 to support projects in there. But the reserve is held in S100 because it's a regional district amount. The entire board has the opportunity to determine where those funds go. So that reserve is held in S100, and we do have that reserve. Each one of our reserves is tracked with the ins and outs, and we can reconcile those funds. But it's noted, and maybe we put in some sort of a schedule in the report to show what's been spent, over the last couple of years.
That's something, does that work, Dr. Graham, to include a schedule that outlines where that is listed?
Yeah, that would be helpful. What account code is this one?
Through the chair, depends what it's being spent on, but it would come transfer from other service. It would come in to A108 as a revenue, transfer from other service, because it would be transferred from general administration.
Okay. So we'll discuss in detail this one in September. And if there's other things you'd like to see in the report, as mentioned, please send that to staff in advance of, I'd say by the beginning of September, so they have time to add it into the report. Okay, we are 3 minutes away from public time, so I'm actually going to go ahead to public time, anticipating there could be questions on community works. And so in terms of how public time works, just noting, number one, anybody online, if you put your hand up using the usual Zoom function, I may not see you. So I will come to you. I will look for either your name and chat, or I will start scrolling through. The process for public time is maximum 2 minutes, focus on a question to the board. Area specific questions will be redirected to that director, and you can take those offline. So that's the general sense of it. And we will start with Ellen. Hello.
Hello, I'm Ellen Chambers from Area H, and this is the second time I have experienced an evacuation order. I still have planes, helicopters flying over my home with buckets right now. And I am witness to an ecocide. The forest of the Slocan Valley, all the way from Winlaw now up to New Denver, is dead. It's a major ecocide. And I would recommend that all of you take a nice ride up from Slocan Village up to New Denver to get a sense of what happened. Because all you can do is say the 23rd Psalm, about lo, though I walk through the valley of death, because it's dead. And that's the forest is our economy. That's it for our tourism. And also the people in New Denver are now saying, okay, that's the end of our property value too, because there won't be any more tourism. When you see what has happened in my valley, it is unbelievable. It's just an ecocide. And there's a lot of reasons why it happened. We didn't have initial attack. We had a couple of public meetings. We had people stand up and say, former firefighters told us no best practices were done in this fire on the Ponderosa. It's just criminal what we have just witnessed. And I can just cry over what I'm seeing. I would like you to go up past Enterprise Creek and have a look. It's hell. You will not find any wolverines up in that valley anymore, for sure. And not only that, the next time a huge, and it will come, one of those atmospheric rivers will hit that watershed, that mountain will come down. I don't know when, but it's going to come down. It's dead. And then we had all of this gaslighting from BC Wildfire Service telling us, oh, it's too hard to send in water bombers. It's too rugged. And oh, guess what? A few years ago, they had the water bombers on Mulvey Creek that put it out right away. And then also
do you have a question for us? We do have a list of people.
You know something? I pay your wages. I do.
I'm just asking if you have a question.
I do have questions, and I think all of you need to know that I sent all of you an email this morning with some research that you might want to use in the future to protect us, because we haven't been protected. That's for sure. BC Wildfire Service failed us. So did the provincial government, the Ministry of Forests, this other organization called the Canadian Interagency FF Firefighters Center. They've all failed us. We have a dead area right now, right in the middle of the Kootenays. It's dead. It will not revive for decades and more decades. And then we have the other issue of climate change. How ridiculous is it? All of the carbon dioxide, we're supposed to change our lifestyles over carbon emissions. What do you think happened when you burn a forest down? The tons and tons of carbon. It's unbelievable.
We have other people we have to get to, Ellen.
Okay, well, you can get to them too. Maybe you could stay a couple more minutes since we have a dead part of our valley now and listen to what I have to say to you. Because it's terrible what has just happened in our valley. And not only that, the RDCK has responsibility in what just happened as well. I was in here before and all of you may remember, I asked you many, many months ago to get ready for this fire season. And I asked you to get local people trained. It seems to me very odd that you can create programs for a garbage program that nobody wanted or no one needs. And yet you cannot get together a program that people need and want, that we want to protect our forests. And we wanted you to do that. Lots of people. And I sent you emails, all of you, asking you to do that, and you didn't do it. And therefore, I claim that the RDCK has it's gross negligence. Your behavior in this last little while is gross negligence. And okay, now here's my question. And it's not a joke. Knock, knock. Is anybody home?
Thank you, Ellen. I'm very sorry for your experience. Tom.
Yeah, well, peace on earth, folks. I came here to ask a question about the transit situation in the Kootenays, why our local politicians, MLAs, regional districts has allowed the Greyhound to go away. I've been traveling internationally. It costs me more to go from here to Calgary than it does from Calgary to South America. There's one bus a week that goes. How do we resolve this problem? Why aren't our politicians sticking up for us? You ask us not to drive, you ask us to use transit, but there's no transit. God bless Mountain Man Mike for having it, but it's once a week. And so the question is, how do we get proper transit here since, I understand we don't have a population here, and so therefore federal politicians don't care about us. How do we get proper, how do I get from here to Calgary to catch an international flight, or to Vancouver, less than it costs me to go halfway around the world? Now, Mountain Man Mike is service is 1 day a week to Vancouver, 1 day a week to Calgary, and then the bus broke down. He doesn't have another bus, so I've got an international flight to catch. I'm gonna miss it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, why are we so underserviced, and then we have, I'm gonna use the word gaslighting, don't drive, use transit when there's no transit. Thank you.
We can let you know that we've advocated to the federal government quite consistently. We also provided letters of support to Mountain Man Mike when he was putting his application in to indicate that as a region, we very much want to see federal transportation reinstated.
Yeah, because we're coming back from Vancouver, but it's like his bus breaks down, right? It's like getting up the hill. I like the guy. He's a neighbor of the capital, right?
Yeah.
And he's trying, he's being subsidized, but really, let's get serious. Don't tell us not to use transit when there's no transit. I could be, in Peru and get a bus to the next city every hour. Here, no can do.
We've definitely advocated.
Don't tell us to use transit when there's no transit.
Okay.
Please, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tom. Lane, I see your hand up online. Feel free to turn on your video. We'll just check your sound. Go ahead and let's make sure we can hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great.
Welcome.
Hi, I'd like to apologize for not being there in person. I'm speaking to you from my home just north of Enterprise Creek, where I'm working on putting out hotspots from the fire in my yard, restoring power and removing still and frozen freezers. I wish I was here to give you a report about the immense community support that I witnessed on the site slocanhelps.org that I set up during the middle of this event. I'd love to be here to thank the BC Wildfire Service and the adjacent agencies for their incredible work. It was miraculous. I'm so grateful to be sitting in my intact home, beyond any words that I could possibly muster. The ashtray that is my forest will grow back. Instead, I'm sadly here to ask questions about what happened. I'm not going to go into any detail about the experience of the last month. You have work to do, and I have 2 freezers full of rotting meat that I need to remove from my home that the RDCK is unwilling or unable to help with. A number of the individuals sitting in this meeting have some of the detail already, and I'm happy to share directly with any of you. Reach out at any time. I can share my contact details, or any number of people can get them. I just have one simple question. Will there be a public inquiry into the immense failures of the RDCK EOC in communicating to residents and managing this crisis?
At this time, no, that's not planned.
Okay, are you going to change that plan? Because a private debrief is not going to cut it. I'm sorry.
Oh, Dan, yes, sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
Through the chair, hi Blaine, this is Dan Segang. So I was the EOC director for a time, and the board doesn't know this yet because this is just unfolding, but we're going to be applying to emergency management and climate readiness for the maximum amount of $15,000 that we can get for an after action report that is going to bring stakeholders together, which I hope also speaks to your concerns with BC Wildfire Service. We're very conscious that things fell through the cracks at this time. We want to learn from it. It's from this tragic event. And so that will be happening, and how that's going to connect into the public, I can't speak to that yet. So that might be a separate piece, but I did want to let you know about that one. And also,
Did you hear that okay, Blaine?
Yeah, I caught most of that. I'm just going to reiterate that I'm not sure how this is going to connect to the public is not very reassuring, especially after the last month. I don't know what else to say. I'm kind of disappointed by that answer, to be frank. So I look forward to you guys figuring it out, because it's not okay. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. Yeah. Can we just speak to that? We do have a waiving of tipping fees for the rotting meat at the transfer stations. Dan?
If you want, the RDCK, the EOC doesn't have accurate information on the situation. The people that we've spoken to at the EOC to do with freezers have given us incorrect information, and the transfer stations have given us different information. The guy that was coming around collecting came by. He couldn't get down our road because BC Hydro was working on the road. He's a volunteer, as far as I know, and he wasn't able to get down. The next collection is on Tuesday, and we have rotting meat in our freezers. There are so many details, I can't get into it, but the information that's been published on the freezers is like, this is the tip of the iceberg, and I'm so angry. I'm sorry. I'm just.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I don't see any other hands online. I'm just going through all the videos. Okay. Okay, then. Okay, we're going to reconvene our meeting then. And we're going to keep going because we are close to the end. So we're not going to take a lunch break at this time. The goal is to hopefully be completed by 1, and then we can get to all the other work that needs to occur. 8.2.1 Community Works Fund Agreement, UBCM. There is a motion there. This is an annual agreement, not an annual, I think it's every 5 years we sign this agreement. Motion, question, Jackman.
I will move the motion. I'd like to ask a question afterwards.
I will second it.
Okay, question, and then Newell also had a question.
No, second.
Oh, okay. Maine, did you have your hand up?
To second.
Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So what caught my attention most, which means here, Mike nicely pointed out the few changes. And one of the ones, the local government shall now, 6.1, be responsible for the completion of each eligible project, etc. We've given arm's length money to some community associations. One particular community hall comes to mind. They've been sitting on that money for a year or more. For 2 years, they're sitting on CBT funding and other funding as they search for more money. So what I'm asking is, can somebody go back and look at the money that's sitting out there pending other funding and see whether or not we have to maybe go back to those recipients and say, either you reduce your scope, as I've asked informally, and get on with something that we know will be completed, part of your something that will be completed, and not leave us hanging, or give the money back and reapply when you actually have a project that you know you can start and finish within a reasonable timeline. I'm quite concerned with money hanging out there with entities that we can't guarantee they're gonna complete the project, because they may be $1 million short or so at this time in the plan.
You got that? Okay. Sorry, who was next? David Off and McFadden. Go ahead, Director David Off.
Yes, I have a question to the chair, to, I guess, the steward, our CAO. Am I reading the new rules correctly that starting in 2025, we can use community works funds to buy a fire truck?
Through the chair, I wish we had some betting options on who would raise that, because I would have put all my money on you, Director David Off. But yes, you're absolutely correct.
Okay, a supplemental.
Yes, go ahead.
Is there a way of us actually paying off a loan starting in 2025 to help taxation, to reduce taxation for our constituents? Not just a new purchase, but if we haven't, we just went to referendum, we just borrowed money, can we pay it off using Area I Community Works funds? And that'll be a tax reduction to our constituents and will remove some of the burden that they're facing.
Through the chair, I don't believe that would be the case, because much like a project with Community Works, you can't retroactively apply it to something you've already done. So my assumption would be that would be considered the same thing. We can confirm though.
Yeah, then we should sell our fire truck and get a new one.
Thank you, Director McFadden.
That'll be quick. Just wondering about I understand why the vote is all vote weighted. I'm wondering why the actual report says all electoral areas, when I know municipalities have their own and they have to do their own process, so we're not actually getting any of this money. I'm just wondering why the report isn't defined which areas this actually applies to.
So if the report, through the chair, the report does, it applies to all electoral areas, so only the rural areas.
Oh, it does say all electoral. That's on me.
But
I just saw all areas and totally missed.
The all vote weighted is the corporate rate where the board's going into an agreement.
Right. But all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. For information, reports. Touch the mic with questions. Seeing none here now. Financial services grant, Kootenay Family Place. This was just missed in our June general allocation. McFadden. Thank you. Second paragraph discussion.
Sorry, what is this? There's no attachment. So I don't.
It would have been one of the financial service grants that would have been named in the budget that we would approve in June, but it was missed. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Grants 8.3.1 for discretionary. So moved. Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. Pop-off discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Community development. I'll move. Thank you, Hewitt. Second. Thank you, Graham. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Chair and CAO reports. Well, it was asked of me actually earlier, so I may as well describe why I was on for 24 days straight and what I do. as chair in an emergency. The first thing that it's not necessarily 24 hours a day of direct work sitting on a computer, but I am on call as the chair. I am the signing authority on a state of local emergency. So my phone doesn't turn off for 24 days. That was just when I finally had Vice Chair Lockwood step in for me, and I designate authority to her. She's the only one, the vice chair is the only person the chair can designate authority to. So that's one of the primary things. The other one is we did review a policy early on regarding access from different entities into order zones. And so the emergency executive reviewed that. That was quick early on. And then a lot of it is just the different details that moved through. A lot of questions such as what was raised in public time come direct to me as director, or I'll redirect them if they're operational. So things around, the training for the S100 had a lot to do with people who are already trained that directly work with BC Wildfire Service, but questions from constituents about how does that work? What's the RDCK doing? Completely outside of us, we fund it. CIPCO does training, Community Force is doing training, other organizations do training. So there's a lot of information providing that while the Emergency Operations Center is providing daily, sometimes twice daily bulletins on trying to capture everything we can. There's also all those things that fall outside of that. And I think most of us living in small towns know that as soon as you walk out your door, you're working. Someone's asking you a question. So most of those days were 12 to 14-hour days. And the primary thing is really being on call. And Stuart was not enjoying this either, but he did call me a couple of times between 11 and midnight when we had to go to order. I think what's important to know about when you go from alert to order, or even when we get those indications, BC Wildfire Service is the response agency. They're the ones that are out on the landscape saying, when is it unsafe for residents to be present? And whether that's the alert stage where they're saying, get ready, have your grab and bag go, or the order stage where they say, get out now. One of the critical things that happens in those stages is weather and wind. One of the most unfortunate situations was happened in both D and H was that we actually had a public meeting in Area D in Argenta the day the alert went on, and BC Wildfire Service providing a ton of detail as much as they could indicated you have a few days before you're going to go to order. 4 hours later, we get the call they're on order immediately because the weather completely changed. The winds went in a different direction, and after 5 days of 30+ weather, it was so ripe that it was not anything they could have predicted. So a large part of it is being available at all times because you can't plan for those things. The other part is being available to the emergency executive, and I think that is policy related. I am not involved in operations. I don't go to the Emergency Operations Center. I generally am only communicating with the CAO. He is communicating with the Emergency Operations Center. That being said, both Dan and Nora would send me different things depending on constituent questions. So that's predominantly what I did for the last 24 days. I was last Thursday getting to a point where I was making decisions for my own area that I wasn't thinking clearly on. And so I called Vice Chair Lockwood and said, I think I need to take a break and step away. And I turned off my cell phone for 2 days. So that's just some of the kind of context in which what occurs as the head of local government, what you're responsible for, and primarily what I was doing. I'm sure there was more. I should have taken notes, but it was very much proactive at all moments. Reactive at all moments. Any questions from me, McFadden?
Yeah, not a question, just I think I can probably speak for all the board that we just really appreciate. I don't think that anyone can really understand unless you're in it, the work that you guys and staff all takes in this crisis, and for the regional district, how big it was and how many we had at the same given time that you're all trying to manage. And I'm getting emails I'm telling James, like every other minute, there's someone either on alert or order or back and forth. And I'm not sure I understand how difficult it is when you're a local resident in that area and how you feel, but you may not see the big picture of how many of these you're managing as really small local governments and trying to coordinate. And so we really appreciate all the work you've done. I appreciate that you're looking into how we can do it better. I think we can always learn and always do things better, but no one predicts that you're going to have multiple of these events all at the same time that you're trying to manage. So when you do your tabletop exercises and all of that, you're talking about 1 or 2, but when you start getting into multiple things where that becomes much more challenging to make sure you're not missing boxes. And I think you guys did a phenomenal job. So I think from all of us at the board level, we just really appreciate all the work from staff and from you as our chair. So thank you.
Thank you, Director McFadden.
Paige.
Sorry. Echoing my colleagues' comments for gratitude for all the hard work. I did want to highlight two things that came up from public time. One, that it would be my desire, regardless of whether or not we obtain approval from BC from emergency for that additional 15,000, that we budget for it, that we do the work regardless. And as much as our predilection in the past would have been not to plan for multiple wildfire events, I think it's obvious to staff and to leadership that this is a new normal, and this normal will continue to hit us all at once, these comorbidities. And so we have to start planning what our resourcing looks like and how we draw on those resources, especially in the province will be low on those things too. So I think this is a reality check. So these simultaneous events are going to be more common, and we cannot expect higher orders of government will always have the resources available to us to manage them. And then just finally, I am really interested in what our learnings will be on the aftercare and how we're taking care of communicating with people and understanding the challenges and dealing with lost garden crops over the course of the year. Their food supplies are really critical impacts after these events. So those are just to add to the mix of conversation.
Thank you. And noted, those were items that I've all identified as chair, and I'm not going to get into what I did as director because I don't want to say that I did a verbal report, none of you did. But there's definitely a lot to learn from an event we've never had an experience with in terms of the volume and how it was responded. I think the biggest complexity that we're going to need support on is the fact that we are mediums for communication that is not within our control, nor is it our information. And that's where it gets really lost. We don't create BC Wildfire Services information. We don't create a lot of these information pieces, and yet we are the vehicle in which residents expect it from. So oftentimes it's our staff. Please, we need more info. Please, we need more info. So I'm going to actually just move on to Stuart, because I'm also noting that we have some staff that need to go and do something. So this is to follow up.
Can I interject one last point? The Argenta stuff, and I know you already know about this, but the training of the fire brigades and how we support communities.
It's going to come back to us. Okay, I'm actually presenting at UBCM about it. Oh, I'm sorry, whole other concept. I did not tell you. So 2 days before the fire started, I was appointed to the EDMA UBCM working group. And those meetings have been weekly. And so that was also occurring at the same time, which was great timing, given I could give a lot of context to an emergency right now. And there's so much work to do on EDMA, but they've asked me to present at UBCM. I'm going to solely focus, not solely, but predominantly focus on how did that work in Argenta? Where is that? And there are lessons the province is already taking from it. There's also a lot that in that committee work that is being raised, that is rural areas are never well understood. I don't care what level you sit at the province. The good news about it is that my elected official colleagues that are from regional districts are more than grateful that we're all sitting in the same room having the same conversation, because so much of what we're raising as our understanding from a regional district is being echoed by them. And we're at least able to elevate how much we fall outside of boxes and how much we're trying to fill in gaps, such as, S1 training on a group level would never occur in Vancouver. It wouldn't occur in Whistler. So there's these gaps where we absolutely have to identify them. So my notes are extensive, and I didn't want to get to all of them now, but it's absolutely a highlight, and we already know it's changing the way things will work in the future. I know Ange has to go.
So I'll talk slowly. You want to go quickly then?
Yes, please.
Through the chair, IT Blueprint, in June, the board approved the 3-year extension on the service and maintenance for our servers. That's what that is. Pretty much related to almost 80% of that payment is related to those items. The other one is another subscription that we've got. EOC activation, yeah. So tomorrow will be day 30 in a row. We've got 40 people at least who have moved through that EOC over the past month. And just to give you some idea of the pressure that we put on our staff, of those 40 people that are in the RD, 4 of them have something in their job description about supporting the EOC. Nobody else does. After they get here, they get into their role, they get into their job. We ask them if they want to come help out in the EOC and work till 2, 3, 4 in the morning, supporting the Argenta Johnson's Landing orders and making sure that everybody on the ground is safe going door to door, keeping in contact with them, making sure that's closed off before they go home. So it's been actually amazing this year. They've got a well-oiled machine in there. Dan and Nora have been in the EOC director chair for the majority of the time, and they've just been rocking it. They've got a great system where they spell each other off so they can get some rest. But it's something where, you know, having one or two more resources in there, I think would make that even sweeter. But they did a great job this year with staffing that. Everybody who's come in through all the different sections has been amazing. Just a fantastic group. I totally agree with the debrief and the work. I appreciate what Director said about finding that anyway. I think one of the biggest problems I saw is the lack of communication around who's responsible for what information. We are very much a vehicle for getting everybody's information out there. If they don't provide it to us, or they're late providing to us, then unfortunately we end up looking bad on that because we're not getting that info out there. And I think that's something we need to improve greatly. You know, the information that we have as an EOC is really around ESS and then recovery. Everything else we get during that response phase is coming from BC wildfire. It's coming from the province. And it's not something that we're not creating that information. It's not our information. So we're playing the waiting game a lot of time when it comes to stuff like that. And I know that this year, in speaking with Dan already, there's some times where there was some frustrations where we do have to go back and take a look at what happened and make sure that we're prepared for all that to happen over the course of 48 hours. Right? They had 1,700 lightning strikes, I think, in our area on July 17. And then we had even more in the next lightning storm. I think it was 2,800, which kind of scared everybody. But I think Dan's still got his hair. Amazing.
Just the angle.
But that's all for me. Oh, I will say about the tipping fees. Yes, the tipping fee discussion that we had. So we had a discussion with Vice Chair Lockwood and Director Popoff as the effective director for those in the Red Mountain Road area. Basically, anybody north of Enterprise Creek that had lost power with BC Hydro. We were doing community pickups through a contractor. It wasn't a volunteer, it was a contractor. But we had costs expended for that. We did try to get it reimbursed through the province through our normal process for that. They reimbursed everything except for the tipping fees. So the tipping fees will be on the regional district. However, in talking with Dan, there is some room in the emergency management budget, so it won't be something where West Resource will have to pick it up, because it was the Rosebery transfer station that was where things were being dropped. We'll have that picked up by the emergency program service as part of the funding that we have in there, so we should be good on that front. But they covered with the EAF, I think, was $25,000, and they're covering 21 of it, which included extra staff time because the Rosebery transfer station is not open every day, included the contractor costs, things like that. So we tried to support the community as best we could. So unfortunately, with the road conditions, some people did not get access to that contractor, which is too bad. But that's it for me.
Okay, I'm gonna suggest we don't have a lot of business left, but we do have a lot of work to do. So I'm gonna suggest we take a 10-minute break and then come back. Does anybody disagree?
There's one Mumpkins, I'm good.
Okay, sorry, Anne, should I have? Yes. Okay, we're unmuted. We are. Thank you. So I do thank everybody living off of muffins and fruit right now. We definitely need to get our staff back into dealing with it. Okay, great, let's go. We'll roll with it. Okay. Rural Affairs Committee, Director Jackman.
Thank you, and it's water now, enough caffeine.
So
we have 7 items arising from Rural Affairs Committee yesterday morning. As always, the committee has been delegated authority to the board to receive delegations to speak to either their applications or to issues of non-compliance. We did have one landowner of legal who was present to answer questions for the committee yesterday. Also actually happened to be present this morning because he had a related item similar to on today's agenda. So 7 items, 4 will do individually, 3, the last 3 is a block. First item is all vote. Item arising from item 7.1 on the agenda. Cancel the building bylaw contravention for Arnold and Irvine. That move the corporate officer be authorized to remove the notice entitled relating to 880 Lewis Road, Area E, as described.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Next one is a development variance permit. Just referred to this as electoral area G. I move the board approve the issuance of the development variance permit, the 2311 G to Ann Filippo and Jerry Filippo, located in 56, G as Nick described. And that is in effect waiving the proof of groundwater requirement, the subdivision file number S2332G for the proposed remainder block only.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Kootenay.
That was a comment.
Yes.
Well, this refers to the bylaw that we passed earlier today.
Yep. Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
So the third one, interesting, this is example, it only goes back and forth a few times, but this is a non-adhering residential use land use measures in area G. I move the board support application A24001G for the proposed non-adhering residential use in the LR proposed by Jeremy DeWitt for the property located at 8960 Highway 6 area G, as legally described.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Fourth one is site-specific exemption to floodplain management bylaw, Willie Electoral Area H. So I move the board approve a site-specific floodplain exemption to permit the construction of a dwelling. It's just right in the report. 24/2H dated July 2024 with a floodplain setback of 17 meters in accordance with the engineering report prepared by Cerberus Engineering for the property located at 5570 Winlaw Bridge Road, area H, as described. And this is also subject to preparation of the covenant under section 219 of the Land Act and section 56 of the Community Charter in favor of the regional district.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Last 3 I'd like to move as a block. They are all community works fund applications. They're all within area F. Interesting. They're not buying any fire trucks this time. The first one is North Shore Hall HVAC upgrades in the amount of 67,900 and change. Second one is the North Shore Hall standby generator project in the amount of 7,550. The third one is the Beasley Fire Hall paving project in the amount of 113,100. All of the funds came from electoral areas F's allocation.
Thank you. Discussion? Newell?
Just briefly, thanks to staff, all staff for putting these applications together and suggesting these ideas and these improvements to our fire infrastructure in the area.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, 10.1. From a historical perspective, it's good to know for new directors that we've actually been advocating to via the province at UBCM several times now that the agricultural land reserve and those lands in the reserve are not adequately identified in terms of actual use and productivity. So we've been advocating for a review of that since I believe I was even before I was at this table 10 years ago. I know I met with the chair at the time, Richard Bullock, when he came through the Kootenays. That was 15 years ago. And they were very keen on being able to do that to, kind of take out those lands that are not arable and put them into productive use. So I want to thank Stuart and Director Vandenberg for putting this motion together to continue that advocacy, that they review that. The one note I'll add is the last time the Agricultural Land Commission came to the area that I was able to attend, maybe they've been here since, where we asked this. They redirected us to do this through our land use planning work, which is very concerning given we have no authority to change an ALR. And we also don't have, we would have to hire consultants to understand land use. And we do have some of that. We have done quite a bit of data work in terms of water and other productivity components that can feed that. But it does become a whole other component to land use planning that we don't have an authority on, but now we're being asked to be the leads on reevaluating, which is much outside of land use planning. So should we be granted this meeting? I think it's important, Stuart would be present to give that history and to give some of that feedback around when you ask land use planning at a local government level that doesn't have the authority to actually designate ALR lands or change ALR lands to do the work to determine if they're appropriate. That's not appropriate. So I think that's just some of the context that I would want to bring should we get this meeting to the table, that it is important to do, don't ask us to do it. And the ALR is very much an area D of 8,000 hectares of ALR, 700 of it is arable. Most of it's the top of mountains. So I don't necessarily have the congestion issues that Creston might have, but it's not applicable to the intentions of it. So I just wanted to give some of that background on how many times we've talked about this and advocated for it. I do see David off on the list, but I'll just go to Vandenberg as this is your motion.
Thank you. And it's an all vote that the board requests a meeting with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Agricultural Land Division staff to reintroduce the topic of reviewing and modernizing agricultural land reserve with the view of being able to identify land without agricultural capacity that could support potential housing projects.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. So I have David off and Newell and Jackman. David off, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I posted excerpts from our 1996 official community plan for Area I and J. We worked very closely with planning staff. Dave Wan was the planner that worked very closely with our APCs to develop this language. We worked very closely with the Agricultural Land Commission to develop this language and place it into our 1996 OCP. They encouraged, as Chair Bullock confirmed when he visited the board, they encouraged development, cluster development on non-arable nodes within the ALR. There's a specific reference in what I posted to Champion Creek lands, for example, which was 900 acres of land, which is very similar to the Creston type of situation. Selkirk College actually went and mapped all of the soils within the soil types within this acreage. And basically, we identified the non-arable nodes that were suitable for cluster development. The ALR was very, I wouldn't say excited, but very accepting of this type of language. So we did all of this work. We spent hundreds of hours doing this work, preparing our 1996 OCP review, process. And the key thing is that this is existing language that is on our books, that it's posted there for reference, because most of the people sitting at the table, Hans may remember this from 1996, but he may be the only one. But the key thing is that we undertook this because of the issues that Director Vandenberg is raising. And the key language that we utilized at that time to gain acceptance from the ALR was the cluster development on non-arable nodes within the ALR. That was the key language. So Kelly, if you can maybe build that into your motion of having that key language that they've already accepted, that Chair Bullock, I asked him specifically when he came to our board, would you support cluster development on non-arable nodes within the ALR? And he said, absolutely, that is something that they would consider. So
thank you, Director David. Director Vandenberg is not on Zoom, so it'd be best if you emailed it to him. We don't need to identify it in the motion because it's requesting a meeting where we could then ask specifics and be clear about that.
Well, if there's any brief prepared, perhaps this could be included in the brief. That we already have this.
We're past the point of writing briefs. This would be a staff request at the time. Unfortunately, this is past the timeline. So we'll just be requesting the meeting.
Yeah, I'll copy and email it to all directors.
You can just send it to Vandenberg and Stewart. They'll be the ones to look at it.
I think other directors may be interested in this language, Chair, respectfully.
Who's next on the list? Newell, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I
Director
just
Newell.
wondered, Director DeBoon had mentioned parks for development. I just wondered if we could just put comma parks.
I wouldn't change the
Or is that
motion. The
fine?
motion is to talk about ALR and where it's not working. So it captures all of those things. I think when we
Okay,
get
it's
to the
just
meeting.
referred to housing and
Yeah.
dog parks, but anyway.
I think that the point here that we were making is that we've been asking them to reevaluate how they've identified it. There's a lot of things where they're not working.
Sure.
Who is next? Jackman.
Yeah, thank you. So I also want to give a little bit of a reminder that there is maybe a good template to follow. RDEK, Mike Snusnowski, had a study done primarily using ag students, looked at more granular analysis of soil, slope, water, et cetera, similar to what Director Davidoff was talking about, but was able to do it on a large landscape level fairly cost effectively, because that's what you need. Now, it was, I believe, back in the Richard Bullock era, and it was received fairly well. So Thomas McDonald, of course, now is the director for the East Kootenay Area A, but it couldn't be too much work to dig that out. And as I say, it was fairly well received that the current analysis of ALR is too crude. The other one we've seen, of course, is there may be soil and the right conditions in parts of Area E, but there's no water. So, I mean, we also have all that historical granular information. But I would go to East Kootenay because I think they're able to do a large landscape analysis without too much money. We'd maybe use South College as a service provider.
Okay. Director Page, go ahead.
You might have mentioned it, but I believe our timelines are all passed. Our staff or ministry requests, this is just.
Through the chair, staff meetings are due the 21st of August.
Yeah, okay. 21st, thanks.
And it's, given that we're going into campaign season, getting a minutes for meeting might, we have submitted those are always done in June. We might actually be more productive speaking to staff anyways.
Yep.
Okay, was that it? All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Okay, I will call for a resolution to close the meeting to the public. Thank you, second. Thank you, debate. All those in favor? Opposed, carried.
Oh, Teresa's not here.
So everybody online, anyone who is a member of the public, if you can, please log off now. So Blaine, if you can log off CM and Valley Voice. Director Davidoff, can you mute, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Almost time to buy a new piece of Scotch tape.
Are you able to remove Valley Voice and Blaine? Yeah, no problem.